Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today, we're venturing deep into the heart of Texas, where the land is as vast as its legends and just as terrifying. From eerie lights haunting dark rivers to ancient forces that never should have been disturbed, get ready for 20 of the most disturbing true stories from Airbnb, rentals across the Lone Star State. These aren't ghost stories spun from fiction. These are real experiences shared by travelers who checked in expecting comfort and found something else waiting. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake: they leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's just the beginning, and the terror waiting in the darkness is far from over. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because here, the night is only getting started, and the horror is waiting to unfold. Now, let's dive into the darkness. The loft wasn't creepy at first. If anything, it was charming in that gentrified, urban renewal kind of way. Exposed brick walls, rusted pipes turned into fixtures, and a full-length antique mirror bolted to the far wall across from the bed. Maggie and Drew had picked it out for their anniversary trip to Austin, booking it a month in advance because it had been featured in some lifestyle blog. Industrial chic with hints of Southern Gothic, the article had called it. Sounded cool at the time. Maggie liked the idea of waking up to the smell of espresso and walking to the food trucks. Drew liked that it was cheap for the location and didn't feel like a hotel. They arrived just after sundown, tired from the drive up from Houston and more focused on unpacking and ordering food than exploring the loft's quirks. The mirror barely registered in their minds at first. Just another piece of old furniture in a city full of repurposed things. The first night was uneventful. They ordered Thai food, watched something stupid on Netflix, and passed out by 11. It was only the next morning that Drew mentioned something odd. He said he thought he'd woken up around 1:30 and saw Maggie standing in front of the mirror. Except she'd been lying in bed the whole time. He chalked it up to a dream, but the way he said it, quiet, half laughing, made Maggie pause. What did it look like? She asked, chewing her toast. You, he said. Or I thought it was you, just standing there, not moving, like watching us sleep. She shivered a little, gave him a playful shove, but part of her didn't like it. Mirrors always creeped her out. When she was a kid, she refused to have one in her room, convinced it would reflect something that wasn't supposed to be there. Her mom said she was dramatic. You just have a vivid imagination. That phrase had followed her into adulthood, trailing behind like a mosquito. That afternoon, they went to Barton Springs, wandered South Congress, and grabbed drinks at a rooftop bar with too many neon signs. By the time they got back to the loft, the story about the mirror had faded into background noise. They made love, showered, and fell asleep wrapped in each other like always. At 1:17 a.m., Maggie woke up. Not from a sound, not even from a dream, just woke, like something unseen had nudged her. The room was dark except for the streetlight glow bleeding through the blinds. She blinked, adjusting to the murk. Drew was asleep, snoring faintly beside her. Then she saw a dot in the mirror across the room. A figure stood at the foot of the bed, still, silent, too tall to be Drew, too narrow to be her own reflection. Its arms hung too long, too limp, like broken ropes. The head was tilted slightly, as if listening, her breath caught. Her skin turned to static. She turned her head, fast, to look directly at the foot of the bed. Nothing. She looked back at the mirror. It was gone. Maggie didn't sleep the rest of the night. She didn't wake Drew either. She didn't want to sound crazy. That's what people said before they spiraled, before they ended up whispering to themselves on buses and refusing to look at their own reflections. She told him about it the next morning. He listened, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and said maybe the mirror was old and warped. Maybe the shape of the blanket or the chair in the corner was messing with her half-asleep brain. Or maybe, he added, you were dreaming. Wanted to agree. God, she wanted to. But she hadn't been dreaming. They went about their day like normal tourists, breakfast tacos, used bookstores, some mural Drew insisted on taking pictures with. But something clung to her thoughts like oil, that figure, the angle of its head, the way it didn't move. That night, they went to bed late. Drew fell asleep first. Maggie stared at the ceiling, counting shadows, listening to the buzz of the city beyond the windows. 1 colon 03 a mid. She turned over, faced the mirror. Nothing. 1:09 a.m. still. Nothing. She let her eyes drift closed. When she opened them again, it was there. Closer this time. Inside the mirror, right at the edge of the glass. She could almost make out a face or the suggestion of one. No eyes. Just sunken pits. No mouth. Just a line that seemed to widen the longer she stared. It wasn't standing. Behind them. It was watching them from inside. She whispered Drew's name. He stirred. She reached for her phone on the nightstand and snapped a photo of the mirror without thinking. The flash briefly lit the room, and in that split second, the figure disappeared. Drew sat up, groggy. What the hell? She showed him the photo, his face drained of color. In the image, their bed was reflected, the room behind them exactly as it should be, except for the figure standing upright in the mirror, watching. Jesus, he muttered. They left the loft by 2 a.m., checked into a cheap motel down the road, and didn't go back. Maggie sent the photo to Airbnb support, along with a panicked message about something being wrong with the mirror. The listing vanished from the app by noon. No follow-up, no apology. Just gone. A few weeks later, Maggie noticed something strange. In her bedroom mirror back home, not a figure. Not at first. Just a flicker. Like something moved in the reflection, but not in real life. Then she started waking up around 1:17. Every night. She stopped keeping mirrors in the house. All of them, bathroom, vanity, even the microwave's reflection, were covered with cloth. Drew didn't see it. Not anymore. He refused to talk about the loft. Said the picture had been doctored. Said it was a scam, a hoax, a trick of the light. She caught him checking their bedroom mirror at night, though, pretending not to. 3 months later, he left. Claimed she was paranoid, obsessive. The last thing he said before slamming the door was, "It was just a fucking mirror." She doesn't blame him. He didn't see it the way she did. The way she still does, because no matter where she is, motel, friend's house, rest stop bathroom, every night, at exactly 1:17 a.m., she feels it, watching, not from behind, from inside, and now it waits for her to look. When Josh and Emily Rayner found the listing for the old limestone house tucked away in the suburbs of Fort Worth, it looked perfect for a quiet 2-week stay while their new house closed on the other side of town. They needed the break. Life had been nothing but chaos for months. Job changes, school transfers for the kids, and the painful downsizing after Josh's father died unexpectedly and left them with a mound of legal mess. The listing on the vacation rental site looked charming. Vintage 1930s home with rustic charm and modern comforts. It had 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch shaded by pecan trees, and the kind of creaky wooden floors that felt authentic, rather than cheap. Emily, ever the skeptic, had even commented that it seemed a little too perfect. But Josh waved her off. They needed something stable for the kids. Somewhere that felt safe. The host, a woman named Nancy, left a bowl of apples on the counter and a handwritten note in a loopy cursive that read, "Welcome, Rainers. Please make yourselves at home. Let me know if you need anything." It was signed with a smiley face and a cell number. The first few days passed uneventfully. The kids, Tyler and Maddie, fought less than usual, which was a relief. They spent mornings running around the fenced-in backyard and evenings huddled on the couch watching old movies. Emily loved the big farmhouse sink in the kitchen, and Josh liked the way the hot water kicked in right away, a small miracle in a house this old. But by the fourth day, something started to feel off. It began with a draft. Josh first noticed it during a quiet moment, standing barefoot in the kitchen while waiting for his coffee. It was mid-July in Texas. Mornings usually felt like someone breathing hot breath on your neck. But as he leaned against the counter, he felt something cool snake across his ankles, like someone had opened a door to an air-conditioned room. He looked around. No windows open. The AC wasn't on. The vents in the ceiling were still. He chalked it up to an odd quirk of the house's old insulation and didn't mention it. But the next morning, Emily asked, "Did you feel that draft near the sink? I swear it gave me goosebumps." Josh nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's weird, right?" That afternoon, curiosity got the better of them. While the kids played outside, Josh grabbed a flashlight and started tapping on the walls behind the kitchen, a section that jutted out awkwardly into the hallway. Emily followed, hands crossed over her chest. The layout of the kitchen had always felt strange. A bump out that didn't match the symmetry of the hallway. At first they assumed it was a pantry, but the pantry was on the other side. Josh knocked on the wall. Hollow. He squatted and examined the baseboards. "There's an edge here," he muttered. "See that?" Emily knelt beside him. "It's like a seam." With a tug, Josh pulled at the molding and it popped loose, with a dry crack. Beneath it, half concealed by years of paint and wallpaper, was a doorknob. An actual brass doorknob, aged to a greenish patina, and a keyhole. What the hell? Emily whispered. They stared at it for a long time, not touching it, not speaking. It was the kind of thing you didn't expect to find, not in a home you were paying $200 a night for. Josh finally stood and pulled out his phone. He texted Nancy, attaching a photo of the door. Josh R. "Hey Nancy, we just noticed this weird sealed door behind the kitchen. Any idea what it is?" The reply came 15 minutes later. "Nancy, there is no door behind the kitchen." No punctuation, no follow-up. Josh stared at the screen. "She says there is no door." Emily looked at the sealed entrance again, suddenly feeling colder. "I don't like that." That night, both kids complained that the house felt weird. Maddie, 5 years old and prone to imagination, said she saw someone standing at the end of the hallway when she got up to pee. "A man with no face," she said, clutching her stuffed fox. Josh slept poorly. Every time he drifted off, he dreamt of standing in front of the kitchen wall, hearing something whisper through the door, not in words, but in emotion, sorrow, loneliness, hunger. Once he woke up in a sweat, heart pounding, and was sure he heard the knob turning. The next morning, Josh found scratches around the doorknob. Tiny, frantic gouges in the wood. Like someone, or something, had tried to dig its way out. Emily was already packing. "I don't care what it is," she said, pale and trembling. "We are not staying another night." He agreed, but something about it gnawed at him. That door shouldn't be there. There was no external protrusion from the outside. Josh had walked around the house twice. That part of the kitchen jutted into nothing. From outside, it was just a flat wall. They booked a hotel room downtown for the next 2 nights and told the kids they were switching to somewhere with a pool. But after they left, Josh couldn't stop thinking about the door. That night, he pulled up the Tarrant County property records. The house had been owned by the same family since 1932. The last renovation listed was in 1984. Nothing recent. No mention of added square footage, hidden rooms, or structural changes, except for one odd note in a 1998 inspection report. Kitchen wall seems unusually thick, possibly hollow. Recommend further evaluation. No follow-up was ever recorded. He stared at the sentence for a long time. Later, he called Nancy. No answer. Straight to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. The next morning, curiosity got the better of him. While Emily and the kids were still sleeping at the hotel, Josh drove back to the house. It was just past 6 a.m., and the street was still in gray, early sunlight slanting over the roof lines. The old house stood quietly in the morning haze, shutters drawn tight, porch chairs untouched. Josh still had the keys. He let himself in. The air inside was still. Not musty, just quiet. Dead. Like the silence in a funeral home, where even footsteps seemed to apologize. He walked straight to the kitchen. Door was gone. Not sealed up. Gone. No doorknob, no keyhole, no seam in the wall. Just wallpaper. Cheap, fake vintage wallpaper with printed roosters. He ran his hands across it, pushing, pressing. Nothing. Then he heard it. A knock from behind the wall. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just deliberate. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. Pause. 3 more. He backed up. His spine felt like ice. Then something whispered, faint and almost breathless, from behind the wall. Let me out. Josh turned and fled. 2 days later, the listing was pulled. Nancy never replied to any follow-up texts. Josh checked once a week for the next month. No new rentals at that address. Then one day, out of pure morbid obsession, he drove back by the property. A white van was parked in the driveway. The back doors open. 2 men in painters' uniforms were carrying out large rolls of insulation. The front door hung wide open. Josh pulled over and asked one of the workers, "Hey, what's going on with this place?" The man, sweating and tired-looking, squinted at him. "Owner had us gut the kitchen. Said it was full of black mold." Josh nodded slowly. "What about the back wall?" he asked. The man frowned. "Which wall?" "The one behind the kitchen. The thick one." The worker looked at his partner, then back at Josh. "There was a weird cavity in there," he said. "Like a 4-foot wide chamber with no door. Just sealed shut on all sides. Nothing inside except..." He trailed off, eyes narrowing. "Except what?" Josh asked. The man shook his head. "Something bad died in there. That's all I'll say." Then he turned and walked away. Josh never told Emily what he'd seen. They moved into their new house and tried to forget about it. Tried to settle into the rhythms of normal life. But sometimes, when he stood alone in his kitchen at night, Josh would feel a draft on his ankles, faint and chill. And sometimes, on the very worst nights, he thought he could still hear that knock. 3.2.3. The house sat at the edge of a dead-end road just outside San Antonio, where the subdivisions thinned out and the cedar trees grew thick and untamed. It was a single-story rental, adobe-colored stucco with a flat roof and a neat little gravel path winding through a small yard of crushed granite and cactus. The listing had promised a quiet desert retreat, and on the surface, that's exactly what it was. Quiet, still. Isolated. Stuart and Carla Dunham arrived on a muggy Thursday. In early July, dragging 2 sleepy kids in tow and shaking off the long drive from Houston. They'd rented the place for a long weekend, just 4 nights. A quick family getaway while the kids were out of school. The listing had glowing reviews, all of them praising the place's cleanliness and the unbeatable peace and quiet. One reviewer even said they'd seen deer in the backyard at dusk. Everything was in order when they got there. The keypad worked, the air conditioning was already on, and a small welcome basket sat on the breakfast bar with miniature bottles of water and a few dusty granola bars. The furniture was clean and modern, the appliances new. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, sparse but homey. Carla, ever the planner, ran her fingers along baseboards and checked the corners for roaches, while Stuart tested the Wi-Fi and let the kids claim the bigger bedroom. Nothing to complain about. That first night was uneventful. The kids passed out early from the car ride, and Carla fell asleep watching reruns of some baking competition. Stuart lay in bed listening to the hum of the ceiling fan and the faint whine of crickets outside. It was quiet. Almost too quiet. There was no highway noise, no city hum, not even a train in the distance. Just the occasional rustle of dry leaves. In the wind, it started the second night. They were all asleep when Carla shook. Stuart awake sometime around 2 a.m., her hand cold against his shoulder. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Stuart sat up, disoriented. "Hear what?" She tilted her head toward the vent above the door. It was one of those rectangular ceiling vents, about the size of a shoebox lid, with a slatted grate over it. The air conditioning was off for the night, so the vent should have been silent, but there was a sound faint but unmistakable. A soft, high-pitched sobbing. The sound of a child crying. They both froze. Stuart climbed out of bed and stood under the vent, tilting his ear toward it. The crying was faint, but it wasn't just sobbing. It was the kind of breathless, hiccuping wail a child makes when they're trying to be quiet but can't hold it in anymore. He turned back to Carla, his brow furrowed. "Is that one of the kids?" she asked. Stuart shook his head. "They're both asleep. I checked on them when I got up to pee an hour ago." They listened for another minute, then crept down the hallway. The kids' bedroom door was cracked open. Inside, both children were asleep, sprawled out on top of the sheets in the heat, mouths open. The crying continued, muffled and distant, coming clearly from above them. There was no attic entrance in the hallway, no pull-down ladder, no crawl-space hatch. Stuart walked through every room, turning on lights, checking ceilings. Nothing, just smooth plaster and sealed vents. He even went out back and looked up at the roofline. Flat, no second floor, no upstairs unit. The place was a single slab. The next morning, he texted the host, a woman named Anita, who had only communicated through the rental app so far. He kept the message casual. "Hey, just wondering, do the vents carry sound from another unit or something? We heard crying last night. Kinda weird, LOL. She didn't respond until afternoon." The message was short. Asterisk. That's probably just the pipe settling. Happens sometimes when the AC kicks on. Nothing to worry about, smiley face still asterisk, but they hadn't been using the AC. Not during the night, anyway. And what kind of pipes sound like a crying child? Carla wanted to leave that day. "I don't like it," she said. That sound wasn't normal. It felt off. Like it wasn't coming from another room. Like it was inside the vent itself. Stuart, always the rational one, said it was. Probably an animal. A raccoon or something caught in the ductwork. He promised to look into it later and convinced her to stay. It was just 3 more nights. That night, the crying started earlier. Around midnight. It was louder this time and more insistent. It wasn't a newborn's cry, it sounded older, maybe 6 or 7. A little girl from the pitch and cadence. The sobbing was rhythmic, almost purposeful, like she'd been crying a long time and didn't expect anyone to hear her. And then, at 2:47 a.m., a voice whispered from the vent, "Help me." Carla screamed and grabbed the kids, dragging them into their bedroom. Stuart stood frozen in the hallway, staring up at the vent as it echoed again. "Help me. It's dark. I can't get out." The voice was breathy, weak, like someone trapped in a crawl space with barely enough air to speak. Stuart grabbed a chair and climbed up to the vent, unscrewing the cover. He shone his phone flashlight into the opening. Nothing. Just a short duct leading into the ceiling, then turning sharply out of sight. No sounds now. Just silence. The next morning, Carla packed the bags and told Stuart she was taking the kids to a hotel. She didn't care what the rental agreement said. He could come or not, but they were leaving. Stuart stayed behind. He didn't tell her, but something about the voice had stirred something in him. Not fear, curiosity. A kind of awful, magnetic interest. The way the voice had spoken, flat and mechanical, didn't sound right. It didn't sound like a real child. It sounded like something pretending. After they left, he walked through the house, shutting off lights, closing blinds. He opened every vent cover, shining his light into the ducts. They were too narrow for anything larger than a cat. There was no attic, no trapdoor. The house was slab on grade. There was no crawl space, no basement. Just walls, ducts, and emptiness. He emailed Anita directly, bypassing the app. "There's someone in the vents. You need to come clean with me." "Is this some kind of sick joke? Did someone die here?" She responded within the hour. "No one died. Please stop asking questions. Just leave. You'll get a full refund." He didn't. That night, the crying came again. Louder now. Closer. Stuart sat on the living room floor in the dark, staring up at the main vent over the hallway. He didn't sleep. At 3:11 a.m., the crying stopped abruptly, and the whispering began again. But it wasn't a child's voice this time. It was deeper, male, scratchy and hoarse, like someone with a throat full of sand. You shouldn't have stayed. The next morning, the front door was standing wide open. The gravel path showed a set of barefoot footprints, too small for an adult, trailing from the threshold down to the end of the driveway, where they vanished into the dust. Stuart left that day. Carla said he didn't speak much on the drive home. When she asked him what he'd found, he just said, "It's not a real house." She didn't understand what he meant. Weeks later, Carla found a Reddit post by another family who'd stayed in the same rental a year before. The post had been removed by moderators, but the cached version was still readable. They'd heard the same crying, the same whispering. One of their kids had started sleepwalking, speaking in a strange voice at night. The family left after 2 days. They never got their deposit back. The listing has since disappeared from every rental app. Anita stopped replying to messages. The address isn't listed on any county property records. Google Street View shows a vacant lot. But sometimes late at night, Carla swears she can still hear crying, not in the vents anymore, but in her own walls, behind the light switches, inside the duct returns. And once, during a power outage, Stuart found a small, dirty handprint on the inside of the breaker panel. Too small to be his. Too real to ignore. It was mid-September when Evan Delaney arrived in Houston, the air heavy with a clingy kind of heat that made the city feel like it was sweating through its skin. He'd come down from Portland for a gallery show at a boutique space near Montrose, something curated by an old college friend who now styled herself as a tastemaker in post-industrial expressionism. Evan didn't think much of the title, but he appreciated the exposure and, more importantly, the free lodging. The friend had arranged a short-term rental for him, a modest bungalow in the Heights, a part of Houston where old craftsman homes stood shoulder to shoulder with ultra-modern glass boxes and still somehow managed to feel like a neighborhood instead of a gentrified ghost town. The house was old, built sometime in the 1920s. with hardwood floors that creaked like bones under every step and a faint musty scent that lingered no matter how many windows he opened. There was a heaviness to the place, not oppressive exactly, but dense. Like the air had memories. Evan noticed the closet on his second night, more out of boredom than anything. He hadn't unpacked much, just the essentials, his sketchbooks, pencils, a couple of brushes, some reference photographs, and a bottle of whiskey. He was lying in bed, listening to the dull roar of cicadas through the screen window when something caught his eye. The closet door wasn't flush with the wall. It hung slightly ajar, maybe an inch or two. He didn't remember leaving it that way. There was nothing dramatic about the moment. No ominous music playing in his head, no sudden chill. He just got up, walked over, and pulled it open. The closet was shallow and painted the same off-white as the rest of the room. It held a few wooden hangers, one of which swayed slightly as if recently disturbed. And then he saw them scratches, deep ones, 4 parallel gouges, each one about 8 or 9 inches long, carved into the inside of the door. The wood had splintered around them, leaving sharp little curls like dried petals. They weren't random. They were purposeful, desperate, like fingers or claws had been raked down the surface again and again, always in the same direction, from the center out, as if something had been trying to get out. Evan stared at them longer than he meant to. It was the kind of thing your brain wants to rationalize. He thought maybe it was an animal, a raccoon, or something that had gotten trapped inside at some point, though the closet door didn't have any noticeable gaps or holes. Maybe a dog, though the scratches were too high off the floor for that. He took a photo with his phone, half thinking he might incorporate the pattern into a piece for the gallery, then shut the door and went back to bed. That night he dreamed of breathing. Not his own, but someone else's, wet, ragged, labored. It was the kind of sound you'd hear through a hospital door or in the last seconds of a phone call. He woke up just after 3 a.m., soaked in sweat and with an image lodged in his mind. Fingers, long and raw, worming their way through a crack in the wood. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, he tried to shrug it off, told himself it was stress. New city, new show. He went for a walk down White Oak, bought a coffee from a place that only played vinyl records, and wandered through some antique shops to clear his head. When he got back that afternoon, the closet door was open again, wide open this time. He stood in the doorway, staring at the darkness inside. It wasn't the kind of darkness that came from the absence of light. It was thicker than that, like it had weight, like it was hiding something. He turned on the light and walked in. Nothing had changed. Same hangers, same empty shelves, but the scratches, they looked deeper, rawer, like they'd been freshly carved. He ran his fingers along them and felt a sting. A splinter lodged in his skin. He cursed and yanked it out, a tiny red thread of blood following it. He didn't remember them being that deep, but maybe his memory was playing tricks. That night, the breathing came again, closer this time. He started hearing things during the day, subtle things. A creak in the hallway when he was in the kitchen. A thump in the attic, even though the realtor swore it had been sealed off. Once, while sketching at the little desk near the window, he caught movement in the reflection of the glass. Just a flicker. A shadow behind him. But when he turned around, the room was empty. He stopped opening the closet, didn't even look at it. Instead, he threw himself into his work, letting the creeping unease bleed into his art. His pieces grew darker, more frenetic. Charcoal swirls that hinted at screaming mouths and long, gnarled hands. The gallery curator loved them, said they had energy. Raw, disturbing, visceral. He didn't tell her they were based on something real. One night, after a long day prepping for the show, Evan came home and found the bedroom door shut. He hadn't closed it when he left. The house was too hot for that. Still, maybe he had. Maybe he forgot. He pushed it open and stopped cold. The closet was open again, and this time there were new scratches. Dozens of them. Crisscrossing, frantic. Like whatever had been trying to get out had finally lost its mind. They covered the entire inside of the door now, spreading down onto the walls inside the closet like veins crawling outward. The wood looked sick, swollen and discolored. He leaned in and thought just for a moment that he saw something shift inside the wall. The next morning, he called the rental manager, asked about the house's history. She was evasive at first, then admitted there had been an incident. A few years ago, a tenant had gone missing, left all his things behind. Police said he probably skipped town, but there were rumors neighbors claimed they'd heard screaming one night. Others said the guy had been acting strange, paranoid. Kept talking about something living in the walls, scratching, breathing. Watching Evan didn't sleep that night either. On his last evening in the house, the night before the gallery opening, he heard it not breathing. Not footsteps scratching from inside the closet had started just after midnight. Light, tentative. Then more urgent, faster, closer. He stood in the middle of the room, staring at the door. The handle turned, not fully, just a twitch, like someone was testing it. Then again, a little more forceful. Evan backed away, heart jackhammering. He thought about running, about just leaving the damn house and sleeping in his car. But something kept him there. Curiosity, maybe, or something darker. The need to know. The door creaked open, just an inch. Then stopped. He didn't see anything, just the dark, but he could feel it, like a pressure on his chest. The sense that something was looking at him, wanting him. That was the last thing he remembered clearly. After that, it was fragments. A terrible cold. The sound of nails on wood. The feeling of being dragged now. Pulled across the floor. He woke up in the closet. Door shut. Darkness so thick it felt alive. He screamed, pounded, clawed at the wood until his fingers bled. And then, through some miracle or madness, the door opened, just a crack. Enough to let him spill out onto the floor, shaking and sobbing and not sure if any of it had been real. The next morning, he left. Didn't go to the gallery. Didn't call anyone. Just packed what he could and drove. He didn't even lock the door. A week later, he got a call from the rental manager. She sounded shaken. Said the next tenant had found something strange. More scratches. But this time, they were on the outside of the closet door. As if someone or something had finally gotten out. It started with the dog, like these things often do. Moose was a mutt with a Labrador's build and a coonhound's ears, gentle as hell but persistent to the point of madness. He'd taken to spending most of his time under the bed in the spare room, which Karen and Mitchell had started using as an office/storage space when they moved into the old rental house just west of Lubbock. It was a squat brick ranch style with a sagging porch and cracked window frames, but the price was good and it was close to Mitchell's job at the AgriLife Center. They moved in late October, when the West Texas wind howled loud enough to rattle the bones of the place. The yard was yellow and dead, the sky always this bleak, washed out gray like the world had been left on a dusty shelf too long. Nothing about the house felt haunted, not really. Just old, forgotten, and sagging under the weight of years. They figured they could manage for a year, maybe two, while they saved up for something better. By the second week, Moose had stopped sleeping in his crate altogether. He'd slink into that back room every evening and settle under the bed like he was hiding from something. Mitchell thought maybe there was a rodent nest under the floorboards. He'd seen that before in rentals. Possums, maybe, or a raccoon. But Moose never barked. He just pawed at the same spot, slow and rhythmic, nails tapping against the wood like he was trying to dig into it. At first, it was just annoying. Karen banged on the wall a few times and yelled at him, but Moose wouldn't stop. One morning, they found that his paws were bloody at the tips from the constant scratching, but he didn't seem hurt, just determined that the board itself wasn't even nailed down right. Mitchell got on his hands and knees and lifted it with a claw hammer one Saturday afternoon while Karen held Moose back by the collar. There wasn't much underneath, just a shallow space, maybe 4 inches deep. Dust, dead spiders, a used-up mousetrap long since rusted through, and one object, thick and waterlogged, stuck fast to the wood below like it had melted into it over time. It was a Bible. A King James, bound in once black leather that was now the color of dried mud. The thing was swollen with moisture, heavy, and warped. Mold had bloomed along the edges of the cover, and most of the pages were fused together. But what made Karen gag and pull away was the reddish-brown substance that slicked the bottom half. Dried blood, or at least something that looked like it, caked between pages, smeared across the margins. The old paper had soaked it in like a sponge. They left it on the back porch for hours. Mitchell wore gloves and tried flipping through it later that night. The first 100 pages were unreadable, fused solid. But as he turned toward the middle, the paper loosened a bit. It smelled foul, metallic, mildewed, like rot that had been locked away too long. And in that loosened middle section, someone had written notes in the margins. Not scripture commentary, not names or dates. Just strange, frantic scribbles. Keep it closed. Voices crawl in. She's still here, Mitchell showed Karen. She didn't want to look at it anymore. It's a joke, she said, shaking her head. Like some sick prank. Maybe from whoever lived here before. They asked the host about it, a woman named Charlene who lived in Amarillo and managed the house remotely through a rental app. She didn't sound surprised, just sighed through the phone like she was tired. Must have been one of the old guests, she said, too casually. You know, folks leave all kinds of weird junk in rentals. I can send someone by to take it. Off your hands. But no one ever came. That night, Moose wouldn't go near the spare room. Instead, he lay on the kitchen floor, staring at the doorway, whimpering low and guttural. At 3:11 a.m. Karen remembered the time exactly. They both woke to the sound of thudding, like someone walking heavily in the hallway. Only the hallway was empty, and the thudding wasn't footsteps exactly. It was slower, wet, like a mop being slapped against linoleum. Karen got up first. She walked into the hallway, past the framed print of a bluebonnet field that had come with the house. The sound stopped the moment she turned the corner. She looked down, and for just a second, she thought she saw water pooling along the edges of the hallway floor. But when she turned on the light, there was nothing. No sign of leak or stain. The next morning, the Bible was gone from the porch. Mitchell accused Karen of throwing it out, but she swore she hadn't. Moose began whining again around noon, pacing the house, tail low. He started staring at the air vents like something was watching him through them. They tried to go about their lives, ignored it. Chalked it up to the move, the stress, maybe some fungus in the house getting into their heads. But things got worse in small, cruel ways. The radio would turn on by itself, always to static. Karen began sleepwalking. Mitchell found her one night crouched in the laundry room, muttering Bible verses she didn't know. Psalm 91 over and over. He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. Karen grew pale. She started to smell like mildew. Her hair stayed damp even after blow-drying. She lost 10 pounds in a week, said she kept dreaming of a woman standing under the bed, pressing her face against the slats from below, whispering about sin and judgment. Mitchell didn't believe her until he looked under the bed one night and found a single human tooth, yellowed and rotted, sitting on the floor like it had been spat out. He called Charlene again. This time, her voice cracked. "Look, that house has history," she admitted. "I rent it cheap for a reason. Just didn't think most people don't stay long enough to notice." He demanded more. "Back in '82, a woman lived there," she said. "Martha Jimenez, real religious, took it too far. Started talking about God whispering to her through the floorboards. Kept her daughter locked in the closet for months because she said the girl was possessed. They found the girl dead, dehydration. Martha slit her own throat with a letter opener 2 days later, but not before she wrote some long, insane message on the walls in her own blood. Something about the Bible being a lock and sin being the key. I wasn't going to tell y'all. Figured it was buried." Karen began carving symbols into the headboard in her sleep. Mitchell took photos, strange symbols, circular patterns, some that looked like letters backward. One morning, the mattress was soaked through. Not with water, but with something darker, tackier. It stank of iron. They threw it out. Mitchell wanted to leave. Just go, take the loss and find a motel. But Karen refused. "I can't," she said, eyes wide. "If we leave, she'll follow." I let her out. Mitchell didn't understand. Until the dog vanished. Moose had been hiding in the closet all day. Then, without sound or warning, he was just gone. No open doors, no paw prints. Just a wet red smear on the floor of the closet where he'd last laid. That night, the house grew cold. The windows fogged from the inside, and from the spare room came the sound of wet pages turning, one by one, slow and methodical. Mitchell walked in with a flashlight. On the desk was the Bible again, though they hadn't seen it in days open to Revelations. It was dry now, but the words had changed, not just highlighted, changed. Entire passages rewritten, black letters forming new warnings. I walk through bone. Do not pray. You broke the seal. Then Karen screamed from under the bed. He ran in. She was there, eyes rolled back, limbs stiff. Her mouth moved, but the voice wasn't hers, lower, rougher, not meant for a human throat. You let it breathe, she said. She was locked away and you let it breathe. Mitchell didn't sleep. Again. He sat on the porch with a shotgun across his lap. When he finally fell asleep, it was daylight and Karen was gone. No sign of forced entry, no note, no trace. Just a pool of red water under the bed and that damn Bible dry now, clean sitting. On the kitchen table, the landlord stopped responding. The rental app deleted the listing within a week. Mitchell stayed in town for another month, living in his truck, sleeping with the lights on. Sometimes late at night, he swore he could hear pages turning under his seat. It was the cheapest place Ben could find, tucked just off FM 1253 outside a dying town called Hightower, Texas. Not a lot going on out there, mostly pines, shuttered gas stations, a faded Dairy Queen that still somehow limped along with a single teenage fry cook, and a few miles of rusted-out trailers baking in the sun like forgotten soda cans. Ben had come out from Dallas after things fell apart with the job, the girl, the apartment. He didn't want to be around people, didn't want questions, didn't want pity. He just wanted silence. The trailer belonged to an old man named Wallace, who didn't bother with a lease. He just took $500 in cash and gave Ben a broken key and directions scrawled on the back of a Kroger receipt. Ain't got no internet, and the SC rattles, Wallace had said, toothpick twitching in the corner of his mouth. But it's quiet. It was. The place sat under the heavy arms of a few oaks, tucked back from the road down a dirt path that scraped the bottom of Ben's sedan. There was a busted swing out front and the whole thing leaned slightly to the left, as if some invisible hand had pushed it and it never bounced back. Inside, it smelled faintly of cigarette ash and mildew. But Ben didn't mind. He set up his mattress on the floor, plugged in his laptop to watch movies, and tried to remember what it felt like to not be angry or tired all the time. It was on the third night that he noticed the phone. An old beige landline. One of those. Rotary styles with grime worked into the plastic and a coiled cord that looked like it could snap. It sat on a tiny table in the corner of the living room, almost blending into the shadows. Ben could have sworn it hadn't been there before. He didn't think much of it. Probably had been there all along and he just didn't notice. That night, at exactly 3:33 a.m., it rang. The sound startled him awake, not loud, but piercing in that awful way analog phones can be. It rang 3 times and stopped. Ben sat up on the mattress, heart beating faster than it should have, and waited. Nothing else happened. The next day, he unplugged the thing from the wall jack, left the cord hanging, a dead snake against the wood paneled wall. That night, it rang again. Still 3:33 a.m., still 3 rings. Ben turned on the lights, checked the plug again. It was definitely disconnected. He stood in front of it, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and stared like it might start shaking or speaking in tongues. He didn't like it. He thought about calling Wallace but figured the old man wouldn't care. Instead, he moved the phone out to the porch and shut the door. It rang the next night, and this time the sound came from inside. Ben found it sitting on the kitchen counter in the morning. No explanation. No footprints in the dust on the porch, no sign of entry. He was alone. He was sure he was alone. He should have left then, packed up, driven straight to Tyler, or even back to Dallas. But instead, he poured himself a strong cup of coffee, sat on the front steps, and told himself it had to be some kind of trick. Maybe Wallace had a key. Maybe there was some weird wiring in the walls. Maybe nothing. The phone rang every night. Always at 3:33 a.m., always 3 rings. He tried unplugging it again, taping the receiver down, even locking it in the trunk of his car. Each time, it found its way back. By the 7th night, Ben wasn't sleeping anymore. He sat up on the mattress, in the dark, staring at the glowing red digits on his cheap alarm clock, waiting, dread sinking in like cold water around his ankles. When the phone rang that night, he picked it up. "Hello?" He said nothing at first, just a low hiss like wind across a microphone. Then softly, so softly he nearly missed it, a woman's voice. "Don't answer," she said. Ben stood there, mouth open, phone trembling against his cheek. "Don't answer next time," she said again. "He's listening." He tried to speak, but the line went dead. That day, he drove into Hightower and found Wallace sitting outside a pawn shop, smoking a short cigar. "You didn't tell me about the damn phone," Ben said. Wallace squinted up at him. "Still there?" Ben blinked. "Still there? You knew?" The old man tapped ash off his cigar. "Trailer used to belong to my sister. She was into things. Got weird after her husband died. Said he talked to her through the walls." Ben swallowed. "What happened to her?" "Went missing. About 12 years ago. Cops didn't look too hard." "And the phone?" Wallace shrugged. "You want a refund?" Ben left without another word. That night, he left all the lights on, drank half a bottle of cheap whiskey, and sat beside the phone with a hammer in one hand. 3:33 came. The phone rang. He smashed it, shattered it into a dozen pieces. Felt better for about 10 seconds. Then the lights flickered and it rang again. Under the sink, he opened the cabinet slowly. There it was. Hole again, ringing. He didn't pick it up. The voice still came. Whisper so thin it felt like it crept under his skin rather than into his ears. Closer now. Ben slammed the cabinet and backed away. He didn't sleep. He didn't drink. He watched the shadows stretch and dance on the walls until morning. The next night. It rang from the closet. Then from inside the fridge. Then from the goddamn toilet tank. By then, he'd stopped questioning how. He just knew it would keep coming. The final night, he sat cross-legged in the center of the living room. Every curtain drawn, every light on, every other object pushed against the walls. The phone sat on the table in front of him. He waited. At 3:33 a.m., it rang 3 times. He picked it up, a long pause. Then that same voice, whispering, "He's in the crawl space." Ben's scalp prickled. He looked up, heart pounding. "This trailer doesn't have one," he said aloud, but the voice had already gone. He didn't move, just sat there, waiting. Then, a sound. Not from the walls. Not from outside. From beneath the floorboards. A low scrape. Like fingernails dragging across plywood. Ben rose slowly, gaze locked on the floor. He stepped carefully, following the sound. It was faint, but steady. Moving. There was no crawl space. He had checked. No vents, no hatch, nothing. The trailer sat low to the ground, almost flush with the dirt. Nothing could be under there. The sound stopped. Then a sharp thud right beneath his feet. Ben stumbled back, and then he saw it, a seam in the floor. Just behind the stove, barely visible, a faint outline in the laminate. He dropped to his knees. Pulled at it. It lifted. A small square panel. Hinged, darkness below. No ladder. Just dirt and something else. He stared into it. Breath caught. Something moved down there. Fast. Toward him. Ben slammed it shut, locked it with the stove shoved on top. He ran. Didn't pack. Didn't look back. Drove through the night with the radio off. His ears straining for any sound but the road. He found a room in a motel an hour outside of Austin. Sat on the bed, curtains drawn. No phone. No trailer. No voice. He fell asleep just before dawn. At 3:33 a.m., the motel phone rang. He didn't answer, but he could still hear her, whispering through the wires, "He's not in the crawl space anymore." They moved into the farmhouse on a gray Wednesday afternoon in late October when the sky hung low over Denton County like a smothering wool blanket. Elena had found the place online after their lease in Fort Worth ended abruptly, a quiet 2-bedroom. Set on a patch of cracked soil and tall grass just outside the city limits, with nothing but wind-stripped mesquites and rusting barbed wire fences for miles. The listing had made it look charming in that filtered, misleading way, rustic elegance, it said. But when they pulled up in the rental truck, all they saw was an aging structure with paint peeling off its flanks and windows that looked like tired eyes. It didn't matter. They needed the place. Elena was starting a new job at the university, and Marcus worked remote tech support from his laptop. The rent was cheap. That was the clincher. The host, a man named Ray Munson, met them at the front porch. He was tall, lean, and wore a worn denim jacket with grease stains on the sleeves. "She's old," he said, patting the door frame, "but solid. This place was built back in '58. Folks come and go. Never had no trouble." He handed them a single key on a leather lanyard and gave a brief tour. Kitchen with outdated appliances, narrow hallway with creaky floorboards, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a back porch that looked out over a stretch of overgrown pasture. The only odd thing was the master bedroom. When Ray opened the door, the air inside felt heavy, like stepping into a sealed box. The room smelled faintly metallic, almost like pennies rubbed together. Ray seemed to notice. "Might be some rust in the pipes," he said offhandedly. "That smell pass." Elena didn't ask about the headboard. She noticed it, though a large wooden one bolted directly into the wall, unusually high and wide, almost covering the whole section. Looked hand-carved, old, maybe antique. She assumed it came with the house. That first night, they barely noticed anything strange. There was the usual settling sounds, pops and groans in the walls, wind slipping under the window panes, but nothing that seemed out of place for an older house. The second night, though, Marcus woke up at 3:11 a.m. with a strange feeling in his chest, like something was pressing down on it. He sat up in bed, looked around the room, then turned toward the headboard. That's when he saw it, a thin line of red fluid, like syrup or paint, was oozing down the wall just above the center of the headboard. It glistened in the low moonlight that filtered through the blinds. He reached out and touched it. Sticky. Cold. He wiped his fingers on the sheet and stared at it for a moment, heart ticking up, then nudged Elena awake. She murmured, "What?" "There's something on the wall." She sat up, blinking grudgingly, and followed his gaze. "Jesus," she whispered. "Is that blood?" They turned on the lamp. Under its harsh yellow light, the color looked darker rust red, viscous and slow-moving like molasses. There was no smell, not really. Just that faint metal scent again. By morning, the streak had dried to a dull brown smear. They took pictures, sent a message to Ray. He replied within 10 minutes. "That's rust. The old pipes in the wall sometimes sweat. When the weather shifts, happens every now and then." Elena replied, "There are pipes in the bedroom wall?" No answer. Later that day, Marcus took it upon himself to look. He moved the bed, which was heavy, and examined the wall behind the headboard. He ran his knuckles along the drywall. Nothing felt soft or damp. Then he knocked, listening for the hollow sounds of plumbing or studs. Nothing. Just solid wall. Curious, he went outside and looked at the house's exterior. The bedroom sat along the north-facing wall. No visible pipe access. No bathroom adjacent. It didn't add up. The next night, the streak appeared again. Wider this time. Thicker. They started sleeping with the lights on. By the fifth night, it wasn't just a streak. It had started branching out, bleeding down in two narrow paths like fingers reaching toward the baseboard. They could no longer dismiss it. Elena called a plumber. The man came 2 days later in a white van with mud-caked tires. He was young, quiet, maybe early 20s, and he brought a thermal camera. After 30 minutes of inspection, he turned to them and said, "There aren't any water lines in that wall. Not even old ones. It's just sheetrock and insulation." "What about behind the headboard?" Marcus asked. The plumber frowned. "It's weird. That headboard's not just bolted in. It's been sealed into the wall. You'd have to cut it out, like it was built that way on purpose." That night, Marcus dreamt of a child screaming. He couldn't see the child, just heard the cries. They were muffled, like through thick plaster, and behind the cries, something else. A rhythmic thumping, like fists pounding from inside a wall. He woke drenched in sweat, sheets clinging to him like skin. He told Elena. She had a dream too. Different, but just as strange. She saw herself standing in the bedroom doorway, watching the bed. There was a shape lying beneath the covers, but it wasn't Marcus. It was smaller, still, pale. The bleeding wall became a nightly ritual. Each evening around the same time, always between 3 and 4 a.m., new seepage would appear. By then, the streaks had formed what looked like patterns, symbols almost. Like something trying to write its way out. They called Ray again. No response. They tried to find the listing again, maybe messaged through the app, but the listing was gone. Just vanished. Elena finally snapped. "We need to open the wall." Marcus hesitated. But by then, neither of them could sleep. The air in the room had turned fetid, cloying, like mildew mixed with something older. They borrowed a crowbar from the neighbor across the field. A favigla hadav. Man with glassy eyes who barely spoke and seemed to watch them too long as they left Dot. It took an hour to get the headboard off. They had to chip away at the frame, splintering it piece by piece. What they found behind it wasn't drywall, Dot, it was concrete. A slab of poured concrete sealed over the intersection of the wall, uneven and crude, like someone had done it in a hurry. Marcus pressed his ear to it and stepped back immediately. Something's behind it, he said, face pale. I heard scratching. They called the sheriff. Deputy Cardenas came out that afternoon, skeptical but polite. When they showed him the wall, he went pale too. He said they'd need a warrant to break it open officially, but he left and didn't return. The next night, they heard it, clear as day, a voice, not a full sentence, just fragments. Cold. I didn't. Marcus started sleeping on the couch. Elena refused to leave the bedroom. She sat with her phone recording all night, headphones in, replaying the tapes over and over. 3 nights later, she played a clip for Marcus. I isolated the sound. He listened. In the hiss of white noise, there was breathing. Then a soft, desperate whisper. He buried me here. They packed that morning. Left the keys in the mailbox. Never heard from Ray again. A month later, Elena checked the county records. The house had been unoccupied for 7 years before them. Before that, it had been owned by Ray's brother. His name was Jacob Munson, a missing person from 2009. The last time anyone saw him. He was renovating that bedroom. They never found a body. The farmhouse isn't listed anymore. The new owners tore it down. They said it was unlivable. But some nights, even now, when the wind shifts just right through the north fields, people say they hear the faint sound of thumping like fists against concrete and a whisper, soft and terrified, begging from beneath the dirt and stone, "Let me out, please, let me out." It started with a chair. Not a remarkable chair either, just a sturdy, sand-colored recliner in the corner of the adobe rental just outside El Paso, near the fringes of the Franklin Mountains. The kind of chair an old man might sit in with a fadijo men, cold beer and a football game. But when Jordan Ramirez woke up that first morning, bleary-eyed and parched from the desert dryness, the chair was gone. He stood there scratching the back of his neck, still in boxer shorts and a tank top, eyes scanning the living room. The hardwood floor where the chair had been was now bare, smooth, and dusty like the rest of the house. At first, he thought maybe he was misremembering where it had been placed. But there was an indent on the wood, a pale square where the sun hadn't faded the floorboard beneath. Clear as day. Maybe the owner moved it, he muttered to himself, except he was the only guest, and the key code hadn't changed. No signs of entry, no footsteps, no dragging marks. No sound in the night. It came back by 6:15 p.m. that evening, as Jordan returned from a hike up McKelligan Canyon, sweat-drenched and sore. The recliner was there again. Not just similar, identical. Right down to the stitched tear in the left armrest and the faded ring where a cup had been placed too often. He stood in the doorway for a long while, watching it like it might breathe. Then, eventually, he laughed. Nervously, chalked it up to stress or desert air, and cracked a shiner from the fridge. But Jordan wasn't the only one. The host, a woman named Linda Flores, kept getting strange messages in her inbox. Guests asking if there was a cleaning crew that came by during the day. If she or someone else was moving the furniture around to mess with them. One woman said she watched her coffee table vanish before her eyes while brushing her teeth, then come back the next night during dinner. Another couple filed a complaint, accusing her of playing some psychological game and threatening to leave a 1-star review if she didn't cut it out. That's when Linda took the listing down, but the house was still there, settled in the desert like a fossil. And eventually, as the heat of July faded into the eerie silence of late August, Linda started getting desperate. The adobe had been her mother's. Old-fashioned, built by hand, thick walls and no insulation. Her mother had passed in the back. Room 6 years ago, clutching a crucifix and mumbling about the door and the earth. Something Linda chalked up to morphine dreams. She never really believed in all that, anyway. Her mom had always been too religious for her tastes, but now the house wasn't just creepy, it was empty, still costing her money and full of weird stories. So she invited me. Sighed she needed someone with a good bullshit filter to stay. There a week. I've known Linda since college, back when she was writing for the UTEP student newspaper. She figured a journalist with some spare time and an interest in weird stuff might want a crack at it. She was right. I drove out there with a couple bags, a camera, a notepad, and not much else. The adobe sat on a private drive off Montana Avenue, far enough away from the city to feel properly isolated, but close enough to catch cell service if I stood by the back door. It was one of those squat, sun-faded buildings with deep-set windows and cracked walls that bled dust. It smelled like wood smoke and old earth. The first night, nothing happened. I made some tea, watched a show on my iPad, then fell asleep on the couch. All the furniture was there, solid, real. The aforementioned recliner, a wooden coffee table, the kind with hand-carved legs, a leather love seat, a tall, antique armoire in the hallway. All of it had a strange, dated look, like it belonged in a photo from the 1960s, but the next morning the armoire was gone. I hadn't touched it, hadn't even opened it. It had just stood there like an old man in a hallway, looming, unnecessary. Now it was gone. Again, no signs of forced entry, no scuff marks, no dragging, just absence. A clean void where it had been. I ran my hand along the wall. Still warm from the morning sun. No scratches, no scuffs. It was as if it had been carefully lifted, removed from time. I decided to stay still. I brought a lawn chair into the hallway, parked myself where I could stare at the empty spot. I waited. All damn day, sweating, drinking bottled water, watching shadows crawl along the walls. By sunset, the armoire was back, just there. No sound. No flicker. 1 second, it was gone. The next, it simply was. This time, I checked it. Opened the doors. Inside, nothing. Bare wood, dusty shelf. But I noticed something strange. The interior, wood was darker, older, splintered in a way that didn't match the smooth exterior. Like the inside had been exposed to moisture or decay. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I started cataloging. Every piece of furniture, every drawer, leg, knob. I took notes and photos and measurements, set up a time-lapse camera in the corner of the living room, left it running overnight, aimed directly at the coffee table. Next morning, coffee table gone. I checked the footage. Nothing. No jump. No blur. The video ran smooth from 12:01 a.m. to 5:58 a.m., the whole room dim, moonlit, undisturbed. Then at 5:59, the coffee table just wasn't there anymore. One frame to the next, poof. Like a magician's trick. At 6:12 p.m. that day, it reappeared. Again, no motion. No entry. Just there. I began to lose track of time. Days bled together. Some mornings it was the recliner. Other days, the love seat. One day, every single chair in the house vanished. For 12 hours, there was nowhere to sit. Then, just before sunset, all of it returned in perfect arrangement. I tried leaving objects on the furniture. A pack of gum, a pen, my notepad. The furniture would vanish and the objects would fall to the floor right where the surface used to be. But when the furniture came back, the objects remained on the floor. I found this ... chilling, because it meant the furniture was the only thing affected. Whatever was happening wasn't teleporting the entire area, it was targeted. Intelligent, maybe. Selective. One night I heard it. A hum, low, bassy, like a distant generator buried underground. I got up from the couch around 3 a.m., heart pounding, ears straining. The floor beneath me felt warm, warmer than it should. The hum came and went like ocean waves, just beneath the threshold of hearing. And it was coming from beneath the floorboards. I started prying, pulled up a few loose boards near the hallway, beneath the armoire's usual resting place, found packed dirt, cracked and dry. But deeper in, maybe 2 feet down, the dirt changed color, turned a dark, almost oily gray. Like clay soaked in old blood. I dug until my fingers bled. Eventually, I hit something hard. A surface. Not rock. Something smoother. Ceramic? I scraped at it, revealing a sliver of dull red, almost like old brick. But it wasn't shaped like a brick. It was curved like a bowl. I uncovered more. Symbols, etched in repeating patterns. Spirals, hooks, unfamiliar angles. I ran my hand along the curve. It was vibrating. That night, the armoire didn't just disappear, it opened. I watched it. At 2:37 a.m., it creaked open on its own. A soft wind came from inside, not air conditioning, not desert breeze. It was cold, wet, like the air in a cave. I leaned in. Inside was not the same interior as before. No shelf. No dust. Just darkness, like a hallway stretching further than it should have. I swear I saw something moving in there. A shape, long, thin, walking on all fours, pale. I slammed the door shut and shoved a chair against it. But in the morning, both the armoire and the chair were gone. I left the next day. I didn't write about it for a long time. Linda sold the house. No one lives there. Now, locals say it's haunted, cursed, some border legend about Los Mubles Caminantes, the walking furniture. I don't know what's real anymore. But I do know this. Something beneath that adobe isn't dead. It's waiting, and it knows where every chair, table, and armoire belongs. It was the off-season in Galveston, late October, when the beaches were gray and empty and the air smelled faintly of salt, rust, and mildew. I had taken a week off from my job in Houston burnout. The doctor called it and decided to rent a Victorian-style Airbnb for some peace and solitude. It looked charming in the photos, 3 stories tall with pale yellow siding and dark green shutters. The kind of home that might have once held oil barons or steamboat captains. The house sat on the edge of the historic district, a little too close to the seawalls, where the wind never stopped pushing, whispering, brushing past like it had secrets it wanted to share. It was quiet, and that's what I'd wanted. The host, a woman named Dana, managed the place remotely from somewhere in North Carolina. We spoke only through the app. She was cordial, but distant. She sent the check-in instructions and mentioned in passing not to worry about the attic. It's locked for storage. You won't have access to it, she'd said. I didn't think. Anything of it, old houses always had places guests weren't supposed to go. I'd stayed in plenty of airbonds, some creepier than this one, but I did notice the locks when I arrived. There were 3 padlocks on the attic door, thick, brass, old-fashioned things with scratched surfaces like they'd been handled thousands of times. They hung from black iron latches bolted into the frame, and the door itself was painted the same yellow as the walls, though the paint was more faded there, peeled in places. The doorknob was the original glass type, dusty and cold to the touch. I tried turning it out of habit. Of course, it didn't budge. The rest of the house was beautiful, if a little tired. There were wide, creaky floorboards and mismatched antique furniture, real antiques, not replicas. The wallpaper was striped and curling at the seams, and every room had a ceiling fan that ticked softly when it spun. My bedroom was on the second floor at the end of the hall, with lace curtains and a tall armoire that smelled faintly of mothballs and cedar. It was peaceful, just old. I spent the first 2 nights reading on the porch swing and watching the clouds roll in from the Gulf. I cooked simple meals, slept early, and didn't bother locking the bedroom door. The wind rattled the old glass window panes, but that was normal. The occasional pop of the house settling didn't bother me. The third night was when I first heard it at 2:07. I remember because I checked my phone when it woke me. I heard footsteps above me. Not the scurrying of raccoons or rats. These were deliberate, rhythmic, heavy, a slow tread. Someone walking heel first, then the scrape of a dragging foot, then a pause, then again. It went back and forth across the attic, a few feet at a time, as if pacing. Sometimes it would stop. Then there'd be a sudden thud, like something dropped or someone stumbled into a beam. I laid there in bed, completely still, trying to rationalize it. Old houses make noise, but this wasn't creaking floorboards. This was weight, mass, presence. It lasted about 15 minutes, then stopped as abruptly as it started. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning I texted Dana, "Hey, just checking, there's definitely no one else in the house, right?" She replied 20 minutes later, "Nope, just you. Why?" I debated telling her about the noises, but didn't want to sound crazy. Instead, I just said, "Heard something last night. Could be rats." She sent a thumbs up emoji and nothing else. I tried to forget about it, but that night, the footsteps came again, 2:05 a.m., like clockwork. This time they started with a bang, something slamming into the ceiling above me so hard I actually sat up in bed. Then came the steps, slow and deliberate, like someone moving furniture across the floor, then dragging. Then the thud again. I couldn't take it anymore. I got up and stood under the attic door, which was just outside my room. I looked up, heart pounding in my throat, and placed my palm against the cool wood. The footsteps stopped. For a second, everything was dead quiet. Then, there was a soft knock from the other side of the door. Not violent, not desperate, just tap, tap. I yanked my hand away. The locks didn't rattle. The door didn't move. Whatever it was, it didn't try to get out. I didn't sleep the rest of that night either. The next morning, I messaged Dana again. This time I was more direct. "I keep hearing something in the attic. Are you sure there's nothing up there?" She left me on read for over 6 hours. When she finally responded, all she said was, "It's been locked since 2019. Please don't try to open it." That was it. No explanation. No offer to call pest control. No concern. I started researching. I found the property on a county record site. It had been purchased in 2017, but there was a notation that gave me pause, a permit for structural repairs following a fire in late 2018. No details. I couldn't find any news articles or obituaries. Just that a fire had happened, it had been contained to the attic, and the repairs were signed off a year later. The pacing started again that night. This time, it was different. It was faster. Steps were uneven, frantic, as though someone were limping quickly from one side of the attic to the other, bumping into the beams. I heard a rasping sound like breathing, like someone coughing or struggling to inhale. Then a thud, and then a dragging noise that didn't stop. It went on for hours. Not 15 minutes. Not 20. I sat in the hall with the light on and my phone gripped in both hands, watching the attic door like it might burst open at any second. It didn't, but the door started to groan, not creak. Not shift. Groan. It was a low, mournful sound, as if the house itself were exhaling. As if something behind that door had started to press, not violently, but steadily, testing the frame. It wasn't loud, but it had weight vibration. A sound you feel more than hear. By dawn, I was shaking. I told myself I'd leave. Pack up. Drive home, leave a bad review, and forget the whole thing. But IDN single quotes T. Something kept me there. Curiosity, I told myself. I needed to know what was behind that door. What was pacing? What was groaning? So the next day, I went to the hardware. STORE, I bought bolt cutters. That night, I waited. I sat at the foot of the stairs with the lights off and the tools in my lap, staring up at the attic door like it was a living thing. At exactly 2:01 a.m. The groaning began. The door bulged inward slightly, as if something leaned against it. Stood, approached slowly, hands shaking, and began to cut the locks. The first one snapped easily. The second took more effort. My arms ached. The third lock, older, rusted, took a full minute of pressure before it gave way with a snap that echoed down the hallway. The air changed. It got colder. I turned the knob slowly. The door swung open with a long, pained creak. Attic was pitch black. I stepped inside. It smelled like char. Not fresh, but old, scorched wood. Wet ash. I turned on my phone's flashlight and swept it across the attic. Blackened beams. Charred floorboards. The remains of a burnt crib in the corner. And footprints. Bare. Blackened footprints in soot, pacing back and forth across the attic. My light flicked. I tapped it, hard hammering. Then I heard it. Behind me. Breathing. Hot, shallow, close. I turned. There was no one there, but the door had shut behind me, and something was moving in the far corner of the attic, just beyond the reach of the light. A figure, not walking, crawling, dragging itself across the floor. I backed away, fumbling for the knob, but the door wouldn't open. The glass knob spun uselessly in my hand. The figure kept coming, slower, then faster. I screamed. Pounded on the door. The last thing I remember is the sound bones grinding, a gurgle, the weight of something hot and heavy slamming into my back. Woke up in the hallway. It was morning. The attic door was locked again. New locks. Clean, shiny, untouched. I messaged Dana. She didn't respond. I left that day. When I checked the listing a week later, it was gone. Vanished like it never existed. I still hear the footsteps sometimes. Every night at 2:07 a.m., no matter where. I've moved twice since then. Different houses. Different cities. Doesn't matter. It's still pacing. It's still dragging. And one night, I know it's going to find a door that opens. They had rented the house for the weekend, a cozy little place with chipped blue shutters and a porch swing that groaned when you sat in it too long. It was just outside Waco, far enough from town to feel like the middle of nowhere but close. Enough that you could get groceries and cell signal if you stood in the right spot on the driveway. Madeline had found it on some lesser-known rental site, a place for people who hated people. Vintage charm, the listing had said, though the plumbing rattled when you flushed and the ceiling fan in the bedroom ticked like a clock counting down to something you didn't want to think about. But they liked it. It was quiet. That Friday evening, just before sunset, they decided to take a drive. No real destination, just east, into the flat sprawl of back roads and dry fields, telephone poles leaning like drunks in the sun. Dustin was at the wheel, Madeline in the passenger seat with her legs up on the dash, windows down, air heavy with dust and heat. About 15 minutes in, they saw it. The diner. It was one of those places that seemed to bloom out of the road, not something you noticed until you were almost past it. Dusty blue and white paint, weathered but intact. A big neon sign buzzing faintly in the pink light of dusk. The Sunshine Griddle. A crooked little open sign blinked in the front window. No cars out front. Not a single one. But the lights were on inside. "Want to stop?" Madeline asked. Dustin shrugged. "Weird place for a diner. Probably run by some old family that's been out here forever." "Perfect," she said. "I'm starving." The gravel lot crunched under the tires as they pulled in. The building was small, maybe 6 booths and a counter, a jukebox in the corner that didn't seem to be working. Inside, everything looked like it had been frozen in the 1960s checkerboard floor. Red vinyl booths, Formica counters, even a waitress in a pink uniform with a little white apron. She smiled when they came in, but didn't say much, just pointed them to a booth near the window. The menu was thin burgers, sandwiches, breakfast all day, milkshakes, the usual. Dustin got a patty melt and fries, Madeline got pancakes and bacon. They laughed about how odd it was to eat pancakes at sunset, took photos of their plates for her Instagram. She got a great shot of the neon sign through the glass, the letters just slightly blurred, catching the light like something out of a dream. The food was surprisingly good. Simple, salty, hot. Not greasy, but not healthy either. Just solid. Comforting. Something about it made Dustin feel like he was 10 years old again. In a booth with his mom and a paper placemat covered in crayons. They paid in cash. The waitress said the card reader was down and left around 8:30, the sky just starting to go that deep indigo color. Madeline said it felt like they'd stumbled into a scene from a movie. "It's too cute, like something's off, right?" "But in a cool way," Dustin agreed. He even joked about making it their new ritual spot next time they came back to Waco. But when they drove out the next morning to show the place to Madeline's sister, who was meeting them later that afternoon, it was gone. Not gone like moved. Gone like a wound that had scabbed over. The sign was still there, bent and half fallen, but the diner itself was boarded up, windows shattered, roof half caved in. The paint was scorched black in places. Dustin pulled into the lot slowly, staring at the structure in disbelief. It was the same building, same shape, same faded lettering on the walls. But it looked like it had been abandoned for years. This isn't right," Madeline said. "We were just here." "Are we sure this is the same place?" Dustin asked, though he already knew it was. His stomach had begun to knot. The booth they'd sat in was visible through the broken window, its red vinyl seats split and sun-bleached. The jukebox was a husk, wires dangling out the back like veins. Madeline pulled out her phone. "I have the pictures." "We took pictures," she scrolled, and her fingers started to shake. There were no photos of the food, no photos of the inside. Just one blurry shot of the sign taken from inside the car, but the letters were warped, unreadable. The glass looked smudged. No matter how much she zoomed or tweaked the contrast, it just didn't look right. That's when the old man came out from the field behind the place. He looked to be in his 80s, wearing a mesh trucker cap and overalls, and he carried a plastic bag of what looked like pecans or maybe old cigarette butts. Dustin waved him down. "Excuse me, sir? Do you know what happened to this place?" The man squinted, scratched his chin. "Burned down," he said. "Back in '86. Some say it was electrical, others say it was the kid. I don't know. It's been a ruin ever since." "Wait, no. That's not possible," Madeline said. "We ate here last night. Burgers and pancakes. There was a waitress. The sign was on. The lights were on. We sat right there." The old man's eyes got narrow. "No, you didn't." "Yes, we did," she insisted. "You think you did," he said softly. "So did the others." Dustin stepped forward. "What others?" But the man just turned and walked back into the tall grass, shaking his head like he'd said too much already. His bag rattled in his hand. That night, Madeline couldn't sleep. She kept pacing the little rental house, checking her phone, trying to find the photos again. "I know I took them," she muttered. "I know I did. I had a video too. The milkshake, remember? I did that slow-mo thing with the cherry bouncing." Dustin nodded, but his mouth was dry. He couldn't remember the waitress's face. Couldn't recall what the inside of the diner had sounded like. No music, no kitchen clatter. It had all been quiet, too quiet. He looked up the name, the Sunshine Griddle. Nothing. No website, no reviews, no business registration. Just one archived newspaper article from 1986. Fire claims lives of 2 in roadside diner blaze. According to the article, the place had caught fire in the early morning hours. A short in the wiring, they thought. The owners, a husband and wife in their late 40s, had died in the kitchen. No smoke alarms. Their teenage son had escaped, but no one had seen him since. Locals believed he ran off to Houston or maybe Dallas. Others thought he'd set the fire himself. Madeline printed the article and taped it to the fridge in the rental. "So we're insane, right?" she said, trying to joke. But her eyes didn't laugh. They left the next morning, cutting the trip short. Back in Austin, things started to shift. Subtle things. The radio would occasionally fuzz into static, then clear with an oldie song neither of them recognized. Dustin's dreams became vivid and greasy, always inside that diner, always alone at the counter. Food on the plate, but never warm. The waitress stared but didn't blink. Madeline stopped posting on Instagram. She said the pictures looked wrong. Crooked, somehow. And not just the diner, all of them. Her face didn't look like her face. Her eyes seemed too far apart. Dustin agreed, but didn't want to say it. Weeks later, Dustin got a call from a blocked number. When he picked up, a voice crackled through the line. "You left without paying." He hung up, but the phone rang again. And again. Always the same voice. Soft, friendly, old-fashioned. The last time it said, "You ordered the special." People don't walk away from the special. He smashed the phone that night. Threw it in a river the next morning. The rental listing disappeared. Madeline tried to find the house again on the site and it was gone. She called customer support. They had no record of any listing at that address. When she checked her email, her confirmation was gone, vanished. Eventually, they stopped talking about it altogether, as if silence would erase it. They moved out of the city a year later, tried for normalcy, bought a dog. A little place in Cedar Park. But sometimes, late at night, they both hear it, the faint hum of neon, a diner bell ringing in the distance, the smell of bacon and burnt toast drifting under the door. And once, just once, Dustin found a receipt in the pocket of an old pair of jeans. Dated July 12, 2025. Printed in faded blue ink, curling at the edges. 1 patty melt. 1 pancake. Platter. 2 milkshakes. Paid in full. But no total. No tax. No name. Just, see you next time. It was late July when Amanda and Daniel Collins checked into the small rental bungalow off Ocean Drive in Corpus Christi. The kind of place that didn't get a lot of attention. Faded coral pink stucco, rusted gate hinges, cracked tile around the entry. Not dilapidated, just old. The ad on Airbnb said, "Vintage charm with beachfront access," but really it was 3 blocks from the water and smelled faintly of mildew when they first stepped inside. Still, it was clean enough, cool enough, and quiet, which was all they wanted for a long weekend. Daniel was a software analyst who had finally pried himself away from work after a bad few months. Amanda was in social work, and she welcomed the retreat like an answered prayer. The place had 2 bedrooms, a galley kitchen with avocado green cabinets, and a weirdly large old flat-screen TV that took up most of the living room wall. They arrived late, close to 10 p.m. after driving down from San Antonio through a storm that lit up the sky like sheet lightning over the flat Texas horizon. There was no check-in, just a code on the keypad and a bottle of white wine on the counter with a note that said, "Welcome. Enjoy your stay." The first night passed uneventfully, unless you count the way Amanda woke up around 3:12 a.m., convinced she'd heard a child crying in the hallway. Daniel was snoring beside her and said she was dreaming. They laughed about it in the morning over coffee and cold bagels, but Amanda swore the sound had been real too sharp to be imagined. On their second night, Daniel discovered the television. There. It wasn't cable, but there was Wi-Fi and YouTube already logged in under some account named Toby C. et al. At first, he assumed it was just a default login from the last tenant. He clicked the YouTube app out of curiosity, flipping through the autoplay queue. And what came up surprised them both. It wasn't ads or prank videos or travel vlogs. It was home videos. There were dozens of them, each about 2 to 3 minutes long. Low quality but clear enough. The thumbnails showed grainy but bright footage of a smiling woman with shoulder-length dark hair, 2 kids, and an older man with a slight stoop. Everything was shot inside the very house they were now sitting in. Amanda leaned forward on the couch. Is this here? Daniel paused the video and scanned the background. There was no doubt. Same tile, same couch, even the same. Scuffed coffee table. The woman in the videos had a thick Texas accent and a warm, honeyed voice. She wore house dresses and walked barefoot across the tile, always talking to the camera like it was a person. "Say hi to Daddy. He's gonna watch this later when he's back from Amarillo," she'd say to the toddler boy with a missing front tooth. In another video, she helped the girl tie her shoes while a storm rattled the windows. "That's okay, baby. That's just the wind. Let it blow. This old house won't fall down." They watched half a dozen videos before Amanda grew uneasy. "Where are they now?" she asked, voice low. "Probably moved." "Or the account's just public," Daniel said, but he didn't sound confident. Later that night, while Amanda took a shower, he looked up the YouTube account on his phone. It had no subscriptions, no uploads besides the videos of the family, and had been created 12 years ago. There were no likes, no comments. That was odd but not terrifying. What was terrifying came 2 days later. They had extended their trip. Daniel was sleeping better than he had in weeks, and Amanda insisted they take another day off before returning to the stress of their lives. That night, they found a new video in the queue. Same channel. It had been uploaded that day. Daniel stared at it in confusion. That wasn't there before. "I swear I checked this morning." The thumbnail was different from the others. No kids, no man. Just the woman, alone, standing in the kitchen with her back to the camera. Amanda clicked on it. The video began with a soft humming. The woman was making tea or coffee, boiling water in the same chipped enamel kettle still sitting on the stovetop. It was dated October 14th, 2012. She turned and looked at the camera like she was about to say something, but didn't. Her face was pale. Her lips parted once, then she closed her mouth again and looked toward the hallway. And then something happened. Shadow passed across the frame. No source. Just a flicker of someone moving toward the back of the house. The camera stayed fixed, recording silently as the woman stared into the hallway, then took a single hesitant step forward. She whispered something under her breath. Then the video cut to black. They sat frozen on the couch. "I don't like this," Amanda said finally. "Why is it dated 2012? "Because that's when it was filmed." "Yeah, but uploaded today? Who's uploading these?" Daniel tried to explain it away, a glitch in the YouTube algorithm, a prank maybe, or some creepy project someone had set up. But the house was too exact. The angles, the light fixtures, the weird blue stain on the hallway carpet. They didn't sleep well. Amanda kept hearing footsteps. Daniel swore he saw something move past the bathroom door, a shape in the mirror. That didn't match his reflection. By morning, they were packed. But before they left, Daniel checked the TV one more time. Another new video. Uploaded overnight. This time, the thumbnail showed the woman walking out the front door. He played it, heart racing. The woman, still barefoot, stepped outside into the bright Texas sun. She turned left, then right, hesitating like she didn't. Nowhere to go. She looked scared. Her hair was soaked at the roots, her dress wrinkled like she hadn't slept. She started walking down the same sidewalk Daniel had parked on. The camera didn't follow. The screen went black for a full 30 seconds. Then a single frame appeared. A photo. A scanned photo. Like a newspaper clipping. It showed the woman's face, slightly younger. Beside bold block letters, missing since October 2012. Last seen on Ocean Drive. If you have information, contact Corpus Christi Police. There was no sound. Just the hum of the ceiling fan and Amanda sobbing softly behind him. They left 10 minutes later, leaving the wine half drunk and the sheets unmade. Daniel filed a report just to be sure, told a local cop everything. The guy, a tired-looking man in his 50s, nodded slowly and said, "You're not the first to mention her. Who was she?" Amanda asked. The cop took out a folder and opened it. Same photo. Same woman. Name was Lila Morton. She lived in that house with her 2 kids and husband. Husband was a long-haul trucker, gone most of the time. Came home one October and found the kids asleep, wife missing. No signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. Any leads? The cop shook his head. None that panned out. Her family. Had those home videos she made. Sweet, weird habit, she liked to document everything. But the last one, the one of her leaving? That never showed up. Amanda looked at Daniel, face pale. It's online now. I'd be careful who you tell. That too, the cop said. That YouTube account's been shut down before. Keeps coming back. Different names, same videos. Folks say the house uploads them, or whatever's in the house. That night, back in San Antonio, Amanda tossed and turned. She dreamed of static, and black and white images of Lila staring through windows that weren't theirs. Daniel woke around 3:12 a.m. to find Amanda sitting at the foot of the bed, phone in her lap. "What are you doing?" She turned the screen toward him. A new video had been uploaded. This one showed Amanda and Daniel asleep in the bungalow bed. The camera angle was from inside the closet. The timestamp read, tomorrow, 3:12 a.m. And then, without a sound, the video vanished. The garage smelled like something old and sick had died in it. Not the clean metallic tang of blood or the coppery scent of raw meat. This was worse. It was thick and humid and had a greasy undertone, like whatever was causing it had been left too long in the heat and had begun to rot from the inside out. Dana noticed it as soon as she followed Charlie out there to grab a couple beers from the mini-fridge. Charlie lived about 15 minutes outside of Tyler, Texas, in a squat ranch style house that had once belonged to his uncle, then his dad, and now, somehow, him. The garage was cluttered with the sort of half-finished projects you only see in places where time is cheap and ambition is optional. A busted-out lawnmower, 3 car batteries lined up in the corner like dead soldiers, stacks of old tires, and tools rusted halfway through from neglect. The mini-fridge was shoved under a workbench, humming away with an arthritic buzz. But Dana didn't go for the fridge immediately. She stood at the threshold and sniffed. "You smell that?" she asked. Charlie gave her a sidelong glance as he knelt to pull open the fridge. "Smell what?" That smell. Something's gone bad in here. Charlie stood up and handed her a Shiner Bock. He hesitated for a moment, then gave a tight little smile. Yeah, probably the freezer. Dana turned. There, in the far corner of the garage, partially hidden behind a pile of broken-down cardboard boxes, was an old deep freezer, the kind you needed 2 grown men to move. It was big, square, and stained an ugly shade of yellowed white. Thick. Iron chains crisscrossed the lid, secured with 2 rusted padlocks. A broom leaned up against it like someone had been sweeping the mess but never finished. That thing? She asked, half laughing. Why's it chained up like that? Charlie scratched at the side of his face and looked uncomfortable. Just venison, nothing to worry about. Dana took a sip of her beer and stared at him. Venison? What, like a whole deer? He chuckled, but it sounded thin. More like a couple. We get a lot of deer out here. My cousin brings them over. Keeps them fresh for processing. My dad always locked it up like that, so I just kept doing it. Why chain it though? She asked. What's gonna get in? It's raccoons? Charlie turned away like he was done with the conversation. Just a habit, I guess. But Dana didn't forget it. The smell was too strong to ignore, and the way Charlie deflected set something off in her. She didn't say anything else about it that night. They sat on the back porch drinking beer, watching the sky burn orange and then purple as the sun dipped below the pine trees. Crickets came out, and the hum of cicadas filled the air like static. Charlie talked about a job he hated at a welding shop and how the neighbors had too many dogs. Dana nodded along, but her mind kept drifting back to the garage. She left just after 11, saying she had to drive back to Kilgore for work in the morning. He offered to let her stay, said the guest room was made up, but she declined. There was something off about him that night. He was usually funny, laid back. The kind of guy who could bullshit for hours about nothing. But tonight, there was an edge to him. Like he was preoccupied or distracted. Or maybe trying to hide something. As she backed out of the driveway, she caught a last glimpse of the garage lights still on. A faint silhouette moved past the window. By the next morning, Dana couldn't stop thinking about that freezer. She worked part-time at the community library and spent most of her shift in the backroom shelving books. Her mind kept drifting. She Googled things like freezer smell decomposition and chains on deep freezer. Nothing good came up. Mostly news stories about sickos keeping roadkill or worse, locked up in basements. She told herself she was being paranoid. Charlie was weird, sure, but he wasn't dangerous. Still, she couldn't shake the image of that chained-up freezer and the stink seeping out from under the lid like a warning. She called him 2 days later. No answer. Left a message. 3 days went by. Nothing. By the 5th day, she drove back out there. The drive was eerily quiet. The kind of stillness you only get in the heat of a Texas summer when even the wind doesn't bother blowing. The pine trees lining the back roads were dense and unmoving, casting jagged shadows over the pavement. When she pulled into Charlie's driveway, the house looked the same but off, somehow. The grass had started to brown and the porch light was on even though it was 2 in the afternoon. She knocked on the door. No answer. She walked around back. Still nothing. Something told her to check the garage. The door was unlocked. She stepped inside, instantly hit by a wall of smell that made her gag. It was worse now, more potent, more alive. Like the rot had grown legs and begun to spread. Freezer was still in the corner, still chained. But the padlocks were gone. The lid was slightly ajar, just a half-inch. Enough. Dana stood there staring, heart thudding in her ears. Her hand twitched toward the lid before she stopped herself. She didn't want to see what was inside. Every bone in her body screamed not to look, but she had to. She reached out, grabbed the edge of the lid, and lifted it. The chain slid off with a dull clatter. Inside, Buried beneath layers of plastic bags and half-thawed meat, something shifted. Leaned in, there was hair, human hair, long and matted with blood. She dropped the lid and stumbled back, knocking over a stack of boxes. She ran outside and vomited in the grass. Her phone shook in her hand as she dialed 911. The police came. So did the sheriff and an unmarked white van. They pulled 3 bodies from that freezer. One was fresh. The others weren't. They were women, all with dark hair. All missing for months. Charlie never came back. His truck was found a week later at an abandoned lot near Lake Palestine, stripped for parts. No fingerprints, no blood, nothing. Like he had evaporated. The cops interviewed Dana twice, then left her alone. They said he probably fled the state, or maybe killed himself in the woods. But no one ever found a body. Just the freezer, they said. He must have started killing years ago. Slowly, carefully. Always someone who wouldn't be missed right away. A waitress, a hitchhiker, a girl passing through town. Always stored the same way, bagged and wrapped like meat. Buried under deer cuts to hide the smell. The chains were to keep things in, not out. Dana moved away a month later, but she still dreams about the smell. About the sound of those chains falling away. And sometimes, in the dead middle of the night, she hears a low, wet scraping sound in her head, like something frozen is trying to shift just enough to get free. She hadn't wanted to come to Amarillo. It was the kind of place that smelled like dust and sunburn, dry wind coming off the plains like the whisper of something ancient. Emma had followed her boyfriend Jason, who was trying to find himself, on some half-assed sabbatical from the tech job he hated but wouldn't quit. He'd rented them an Airbnb, a squat, one-story ranch house that looked like it had been carved out of concrete and heat stroke, parked on the edge of a cracked residential street that seemed permanently trapped in 1994. The grass in the yard was brittle and yellow, and the porch light flickered with a kind of nervous rhythm, like a warning blink from something sentient. Emma had hated it from the second they pulled up, but she kept her mouth shut. That was kind of her thing, enduring things until they ended. Jobs, relationships, trips like this. Jason had said 2 weeks max. It's just a place to chill out and disconnect, he'd said, tugging on the beanie he wore even in this heat, like his personality would unravel if he ever showed the top of his head. There's a lake 10 minutes away. Maybe you can paint again. She hadn't painted in 6 years. The house was hot even with the AC running. The bedroom window had been screwed shut from the outside, and the floorboards creaked in a way that felt personal. There was a picture on the wall, an old, sun-bleached Polaroid of a boy in a cowboy hat standing in front of a chain-link fence. Someone had written Braden -1993 in shaky Sharpie along the bottom. The boy was looking dead at the camera, not smiling. His teeth looked wrong. The host, a woman named Trish, had left a welcome note on the chipped Formica counter. It was written in an awkward cursive, the kind you don't see outside of gas station birthday cards. Welcome to your home away from home. Please don't open the closet in the hall. It's storage. Text if you need anything. Emma sent a message that first night asking if there were any extra towels. She never got a reply. By the third day, she had stopped asking. Jason spent most of his time at the lake trying to teach himself to fish. He came back sunburned and frustrated, talking about a local guy who told him there were gar down there, big enough to bite your leg off. Emma stayed in the house, mostly. She tried to read, tried to ignore the smell in the bathroom, mildew and something sweeter, faintly metallic, like a penny in the mouth. It was on the 4th morning that she found it. She'd been standing in the shower, trying to enjoy the one part of the house that didn't creak or hum or buzz weirdly through the walls. The water pressure was decent. That was a small miracle. She turned off the tap, reached down to pick up a clump of her own shed hair by the drain. And that's when she saw it. A tooth dot at first. She thought it might be a weird chunk of calcium, some flake of tile. But it had the root still on it, jagged. Yellow at the end, as if it had been yanked out raw. The crown was intact. A molar, adult, human. She screamed, dropped it. It bounced off the porcelain and rattled to a stop by her foot. Jason came running in, shirtless and half awake, asking what the hell was wrong. She pointed at it, not touching it again. He picked it up and frowned. Probably fake. Leftover from a Halloween prop or something. She looked at him like he was insane. Who leaves a molar in a shower drain? Jason just shrugged and dropped it in the trash. This place is creepy. I agree, but don't lose it over a plastic tooth. Emma waited until he left for the lake again. Then she fished it out of the trash. It wasn't plastic. She Googled pictures of human molars, comparing the shape, the wear, the blood-darkened grooves along the base of the root. She turned it in her fingers, feeling the roughness where the pulp had torn. It was real. Someone had lost this violently. She sent another message to Trish, then another and another. Can you please tell me if anyone else stayed here recently? I found something in the bathroom. No reply. She checked the Airbnb listing, but it was suddenly down. Page not found. That night, Jason fell asleep fast. Emma lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan spinning above them. It made a low ticking noise, like a metronome slowly winding down. Around 3 a.m., she heard a soft thunk from the bathroom. She got up, cold despite the heat. There was another tooth on the floor. This one was smaller. Incisor, maybe. Also real. She didn't scream this time. Just picked it up with a tissue and stared at it until sunrise. The next morning, Jason said maybe it was raccoons in the walls. You know how they hoard stuff. Maybe there's a nest in the plumbing. Emma wanted to hit him. Instead, she went into town. Amarillo Center was a weird blend of old and older. Strip malls that had gone out of business years ago. $1. General next to a boarded-up arcade with a sign that read Party House in faded purple letters. She found the county records office and asked about the house. The clerk was a bored woman in her 60s with a cough like a busted carburetor. She looked up the address. That place? She gave Emma a strange look. Used to belong to a woman named Darlene Kessler. She went missing, late 90s. Emma's skin prickled. Missing? She asked. The woman nodded, tapping the screen with her overgrown fingernail. Just up and disappeared. They said she was off. Neighborhood kids wouldn't go near that house. Cops never found anything. Then some company bought it in 2009, flipped it. Been renting it out ever since. Emma asked if there had been any other incidents. The woman hesitated. There was a couple, maybe 5 years ago, she said. Left in the middle of the night. Said something about voices in the pipes. Never came back for their stuff. Emma went home in a daze. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in the hallway, staring at the closet door, the one Trish had said not to open. She hadn't tried. Until now. She found a screwdriver in the kitchen drawer. Unscrewed the hinges slowly. Quietly. Inside was a smell that hit her like a wall mildew, rust, and something else. Rot. The closet was empty except for a small square vent at the back near the floor. Something had stained the wood beneath it, dark and old. She knelt down. There was something in the vent. Paper, maybe. She reached in, pulled out a bundle. Photos. Old Polaroids. All of children. Different ones. Dozens. All standing in front of that same chain-link fence. Some smiling, some not. One of them was the boy from the living room picture. Brayden. Except in this one. His mouth was open. Wide. and he was missing several teeth. She looked closer. The gums were raw, bloody. The next photo was of a girl with her mouth sewn shut. Black thread, eyes open. Emma dropped them all. Behind her, the bathroom light flicked on by itself. She stood slowly, walked toward it. The tub was full of water. She hadn't run a bath. Something moved beneath the surface, not quickly, just shifting. She saw a ripple, and then something floated up, a third tooth. She backed out of the room. Jason was still asleep, snoring like nothing had happened. She shook him hard. He grunted and rolled over. "Jason, we have to leave. Now." "Jesus, again with this?" She grabbed her bag, car keys. Her voice was tight, trembling. "I'm not staying here another night. I don't care what you do." He followed her to the door, groggy and pissed. "It's just some weird old house. You're acting like it's haunted." That word stopped her. She turned slowly. "It's not haunted," she said. "It's hungry." She drove into town and checked into a motel off I-40. Left Jason there, still cursing under his breath. She didn't sleep, just stared at the door, half expecting to hear something behind it. Wet footsteps. The next morning, she tried calling Jason. No answer. Texted. Nothing. By the afternoon, she drove back. The house was quiet. The porch light was off. His car was still there, keys in the ignition. Inside, the house smelled like copper. Shower was running. She walked slowly toward the bathroom. The water was dark, reddish. There were more teeth on the floor, now 6, 7. Some still with gums attached. She found one of Jason's shoes by the closet. Inside the vent, something breathed, not loud, but wet and slow. That was the last time. She saw him. She went to the police. They searched the house. Found nothing. No blood. No photos. No teeth. They told her he probably ran off. That maybe he didn't want to be found, but she knew every few weeks she gets a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, there's always a single molar wrapped in tissue. She keeps them all. There are 27 so far. The listing caught my eye because it was cheap. Too cheap for a place that high up in a Dallas high-rise with a view of the skyline and granite. Countertops that shimmered in the rental photos like they'd just been polished. It was a swanky-looking corner loft on the 23rd floor, listed under the designer's den, a fashion-themed Airbnb with floor-to-ceiling windows, chrome lighting, polished concrete floors, and 6 mannequins staged like guests at a party frozen in time. It was kitschy, but I didn't mind kitschy. I was coming in from Lubbock, driving 6 hours east to visit my younger brother in the hospital. He'd gotten himself into a drunk driving accident again, and this time it had taken out 3 vertebrae, and most of his left foot. I didn't want to stay in some sterile hotel off the highway. I wanted something with character. Somewhere I could have a whiskey at the window and look out over a city that didn't know or care what kind of family you came from. The host's name was Harper. They had a 5-star rating, glowing reviews, the whole shebang. But if you kept scrolling past all the shiny compliments about the view and the modern layout, you started to hit the weird ones. Most were buried, but they were there. One reviewer from 3 months ago said they woke up in the middle of the night and found all 6 mannequins, which were positioned in various casual poses around the apartment, had somehow turned to face the bed. I didn't hear a thing. Just opened my eyes, and they were all there, staring, they wrote. Another guest claimed one had moved into the kitchen overnight. It wasn't funny, she said. I don't scare easy, but I was alone, and it felt like someone had been watching me. I chalked it up to people playing pranks on themselves. You know how your brain gets in unfamiliar places? Creaking pipes sound like footsteps. Shadows grow longer than they should. objects look like. They move when they don't. The mind fills in gaps. Especially late at night when you've had a drink or two. The check-in was contactless. There was a code box by the door, and inside, it looked exactly like the photos. Better, even. The skyline glimmered outside the wraparound windows like something out of a cyberpunk movie. Downtown Dallas at night always looked artificial to me, too clean and symmetrical, like it was trying too hard to be something. I dropped my duffel on the leather couch and looked around. The mannequins were taller than I expected, 6 of them. 3 women, 3 men. The women were dressed in old couture. One had a pillbox hat and gloves, another a gold evening gown that glittered in the light, and the third in a plaid pantsuit with oversized sunglasses perched on her forehead. The men were more modern, one in a tailored suit, one in denim and a leather jacket, and one shirtless with fitted slacks, the way fashion magazines sometimes style male models. They were arranged naturally, almost artistically. One woman leaned, with a hand on the kitchen counter, like she was mid-laugh at a party. The shirtless man sat in a chair, legs crossed casually. Another leaned against the balcony door, looking out over the skyline. They were posed just right, like someone had spent a long time studying human posture and frozen the moment just before something happened. I admit, they were a little unsettling up close. Their faces were smooth, no eyes, no mouths, just vague impressions of features. The lack of expression, paired with their exact posture, made them feel like they were thinking. Or watching. I had a whiskey that first night, standing barefoot at the window with the city buzzing below. It felt good to be somewhere clean and bright, somewhere with polish. I didn't think about my brother or the accident or the hospital. Smells waiting for me the next morning. I just watched the lights change. I went to bed around midnight, lights off, TV humming in the background. I didn't notice anything strange until the next morning. When I came out of the bedroom, one of the mannequins had moved, not dramatically, just enough that I was sure it hadn't been like that the night before. The shirtless one who'd been sitting near the window was now standing, facing the kitchen, arms hanging loosely at his sides. I stood there for a long time, trying to remember, was that how he'd been? Was I misremembering? I walked around the room twice, checking them all, feeling foolish. I convinced myself the host probably came in at some point and rearranged them. Maybe they thought it added a sense of novelty for return guests. Still, I checked the door code box. No signs of tampering. I checked the app to see if anyone had entered. Nothing. The second night, I slept restlessly. Dreams I couldn't quite remember. Something about eyes in the walls, something about whispers behind glass. I woke at 3:11 a.m., dry-mouthed and sweating. I sat up and immediately saw the silhouette of one of the mannequins in the doorway of the bedroom. I didn't scream, but I froze. It was one of the women, the one in the gold evening gown. She was just standing there, head tilted slightly to the side like she was listening for something. I didn't move for what felt like 5 minutes. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. Eventually I got out of bed and approached her. I figured maybe I'd sleepwalked and moved her without realizing it. People do weird things in unfamiliar places. But when I touched her arm, the skin of the mannequin was warm. Not hot, but not cold plastic either. Room temperature. Like a person who'd been standing in the same place for a long time. Pushed her gently back into the main room and turned every light on. Sat on the couch and waited for the sun to come up. I should have left that morning. I packed my bag, left it by the door. But something held me there, a kind of morbid curiosity. I told myself I'd stay one more night just to prove to myself. There was nothing going on. I even laughed about it to the nurse at the hospital when I visited my brother. You know how those city people decorate, I said. Fashion mannequins in the living room, real classy. But when I got back to the loft that night, all 6 mannequins were gone. I panicked. Thought someone had broken in, robbed the place. But nothing else was missing. My bag was untouched. The cabinets, the TV, my wallet, all there. Just the mannequins. Vanished. I called Harper, the host. No answer. Just voicemail. I left a message. Hey, the mannequins are missing. Just wanted to check if you came by or something. No big deal, just weird. I started to feel like I was losing my grip. I took another whiskey and sat on the edge of the bed. And that's when I saw them again. All 6 of them, clustered out on the balcony, backs to the glass. I hadn't noticed them at first because the skyline lights reflected so brightly. But they were there, shoulder to shoulder, all facing out over the city, completely still. I walked slowly to the window and stood behind the glass. They didn't move. I knocked once, lightly. Nothing. I went to sleep with the bedroom door locked, chair under the knob like a goddamn horror movie cliche. That final night, something changed. The air in the apartment got thick, like humidity without heat. The walls felt closer. Around 2:45 a.m., I woke again. This time not from a sound, but from the pressure in the room. Like someone sitting on your chest. I turned my head and saw the bedroom door open, just a crack. I hadn't heard it. The chair was still against it, but now tilted, useless. All. 6 mannequins were inside. They stood around the bed, 1 at each corner and 2 near the footboard. Closer than before. Much closer. I couldn't scream. My throat closed. I don't know if it was sleep paralysis or panic or something else, but I couldn't move. The gold-dressed mannequin was the closest. She leaned in slightly, head angled like she was peering into my eyes. The room buzzed like static, like a low hum inside my skull. Then they started to shift, not dramatically. No horror movie lunges or jerky movements. Just small adjustments. Fingers curling, heads tilting, shoulders raising. As if they were waking up. Or deciding something. The lights in the room flickered. When they came back, only 4 mannequins remained. 2 were gone. I sat up fast, adrenaline finally breaking through whatever paralysis had held me. The room was empty now. No mannequins at all. I grabbed my bag and ran barefoot to the elevator, slamming the button until the doors opened. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe until I was in my car, doing 80 on I-30 West with the city shrinking behind me. A week later, Harper finally called back. They sounded tired, not scared. Just tired. You saw them, huh? They said they only move for certain people. Don't worry. They won't follow you, probably. Then they hung up. I never left a review. Never told anyone, not even my brother. But sometimes I dream about them. Not the mannequins themselves, but the poses. The way they stood, how they leaned. Sometimes I wake up and find my own arms bent just so, my head tilted at that familiar, impossible angle, like something's practicing inside me. Like I'm slowly becoming one of them. In Fredericksburg, nestled between a vineyard and a bed and breakfast that looked like it had been scooped from a postcard, stood an old retro-themed cottage called the Finch House. It had been built in the 1940s by a retired railroad man named Harold Finch, and though it passed through a string of owners over the years, it managed to hold onto a certain stubborn charm. Weathered siding painted in mint green, flower boxes overflowing with red geraniums, and a wooden sign that creaked in the wind like an uneasy breath. The Finch House had recently been converted into a short-term rental, popular with couples on wine tours or people just looking to unplug for a few days. There was no TV, barely any cell reception, and instead of modern decor, the place leaned hard into nostalgia, rotary phones, porcelain lamps, needlepoint wall hangings, and tucked in one corner of the small living room near a dusty bookshelf. An old Underwood typewriter sitting on a roll-top desk, its black paint chipped and its keys stiff with age. No one really paid it much mind. Most guests thought it was just for looks, a conversation piece. But sometimes, not always, in the still hours of the night, just when the cicadas had gone silent and the wind was too tired to rattle the leaves, guests claimed they heard it, a soft series of clicks, methodical, deliberate. The sound of typing. People joked about it in the guest book. Tell your ghost he has a typo in line 3, someone wrote in loopy cursive. Another entry, dated just 3 weeks before everything went wrong, read, "Didn't sleep well. Something was typing. Downstairs around 2 a.m. creeped me out. Loved the scones, though." It would have stayed just a spooky little anecdote, a harmless tale passed from one tourist to the next, if not for the Miller couple. Lauren and Craig, newlyweds from Austin, on their mini-moon after a courthouse wedding. They checked in on a Thursday afternoon in late October, their hatchback loaded with luggage and wine they'd picked up along the way. The property manager, a man named Keith who lived 2 blocks down, handed them the keys and said something about the place having character, which Craig laughed at and Lauren pretended not to hear. They settled in quickly, opening the windows to let in the autumn air. Lauren made tea. Craig found a dusty deck of cards in a drawer, and for a while it was exactly what they'd wanted. Simple, quiet, removed from the noise of their normal lives. They cooked pasta that first night and ate by candlelight. It wasn't romantic. The power had flickered earlier and Lauren didn't trust the overheads, but it had a certain charm. That's how she put it, anyway. A certain charm. Craig just nodded, chewing. It was too quiet for him. The typing started at 3:17 a.m. Lauren sat up in bed first, thinking at first it was hail or maybe a tree branch scraping the roof. But the sound was too sharp, too organized. Click, click, click. A pause. Then more. Like someone punching letters in a pattern. Craig grunted, half asleep, and turned over. She listened for a minute, her throat dry, then slipped out of bed, padded to the bedroom door, and opened it. Silence. She stood there for a few more seconds, then shut the door again, muttering something about pipe settling. She didn't fall back asleep for a long time. The next morning, while making coffee, Craig let out a short laugh. "Hey, Laura, did you write this?" She looked up from her toast, confused. He was at the desk, holding a piece of yellowing paper, the kind that had been fed into the typewriter. His voice carried an edge of something, nervous amusement, maybe, but he turned it toward her like he'd found a fortune cookie, typed across the top in faded black letters, a single sentence. "Don't go in the cellar," she frowned. "No, I didn't touch that thing." Craig looked back at the desk, then at her. "Was this here yesterday?" "I don't think so. I didn't notice it." "Do you think the owner puts that there to mess with people?" She didn't answer, just stared at the sentence until the coffee went cold. There was a cellar. The door to it was in the kitchen, half hidden behind a wooden pantry. Keith had pointed it out when they checked in, said it was mostly storage. Old tools, maybe a water heater, and that the lock stuck sometimes. "No need to go down there," he'd said with a shrug. "All the important stuff's upstairs." Neither of them mentioned the message again that day. They went to a vineyard, had a late lunch, drank too much wine. But that night, the typewriter started up again. Earlier this time, just after midnight. The sound was unmistakable now. Lauren sat upright, every hair on her arm standing. Click dash click dash click. Click click. Pause. Click. She reached for Craig, but he was already awake, eyes wide in the dark. He whispered, "You hear that, right?" She nodded. They didn't move. Just lay there, listening. while the typewriter carried on downstairs like someone was sitting at it with all the time in the world. At 6 a.m., Craig went down. The typewriter had another message. Don't go in the cellar. Same sentence. Different page. The paper was fresh, the ink darker. Like it had just been typed. They didn't talk much over breakfast. Craig opened the cellar door and looked down but didn't go in. Lauren told him not to. Her voice had taken on a different quality. She was pale and shaking, though she tried to hide it. He promised he wouldn't, then pulled the door closed and wedged a chair under the knob. That night they didn't sleep. Craig dozed in and out, clutching a flashlight, while Lauren sat in the corner of the bedroom with her knees pulled to her chest, watching the hallway like something was going to crawl up it. The typing came again, louder this time, more urgent. The keys clattered like bones being dropped down a chute. Neither of them went to check. The following morning, there were 3 pages waiting, all the same message. Don't go in the cellar. Dawn. To go in the cellar. Don't go in the cellar. Craig tried calling Keith, but the call wouldn't go through. No bars. Lauren begged him to leave. He wanted to, but the car wouldn't start. Just gave a wheezing noise like something was stuck in the engine. He lifted the hood, stared at it blankly, then slammed it shut. We'll walk, he said. Towns. Not far. They packed their bags, but when Craig went to open the front door, it wouldn't budge. The deadbolt turned, the knob twisted, but it felt like the whole door was welded in place. He even tried the windows, but they stuck fast in the frames. That night, the typewriter didn't type. Instead, something else started. A thudding. Heavy, dragging footsteps coming from beneath the floorboards. The sound of something moving slowly in the dark, pacing beneath them like a dog that knew they were home. Lauren started crying. Craig grabbed the poker from the fireplace and stood in the hallway, eyes darting, sweating bullets. They didn't sleep at all. By morning, the typewriter had produced a final message. He let it out. Craig read it 3 times before he said a word. Then he turned to Lauren and asked, "Did you open the cellar?" She shook her head violently. Panicked. He believed her. He also knew what he had to do. He moved the chair, opened the cellar door, and turned on his flashlight. The stairs were narrow and steep, the kind you had to angle your feet to get down. It smelled of dirt and rust and old water. He told Lauren to stay upstairs, but she followed anyway, gripping his sleeve like a child. They made it about halfway down before the light flickered, then died. The air turned freezing, not cold, freezing. Their breath steamed out in thick clouds. Something moved below them, scraping softly. Craig called out, "Who's down there?" But it came out like a whisper, as if the cellar itself swallowed sound. Then, at the base of the stairs, a figure began to take shape, not fully visible. More like a distortion in the air, like heat on asphalt. But it had eyes. Or at least, something that glowed like eyes. Yellow, faint, and filled with an ancient kind of hatred. Lauren screamed. Craig backed up, swinging the flashlight like a bat even though it didn't work. The figure didn't move. It just watched, then it began to climb the stairs. They didn't run fast enough. The front door flew open on its own just as they reached it, and they barreled out into the morning, barefoot, hysterical. They ran the 2 blocks to Keith's house. He opened the door in his pajamas, blinking in confusion. They didn't explain. They just left. 3 days later, Keith went to check the cottage. The door was open. The typewriter was gone. In its place, nailed to the roll-top desk, was a single sheet of paper, typed in fresh black ink. It's upstairs now. The first time the painting fell, Laura didn't think much of it. She had just arrived at the Hillsborough cabin, a weekend rental nestled at the edge of a thin stretch of woods, where the pine trees grew tall and quiet and the gravel road hissed. under tires like sand. The air smelled of cedar and moss, and the humidity curled her hair the minute she stepped out of the car. The cabin was older than the listing had suggested, real wood, not paneling, with a low porch and mismatched shingles. Still, it had a charm to it. Quaint, rustic, remote. She'd rented the place for solitude, nothing more. No fiancé to answer to, no coworkers, no traffic or deadlines. Just time. Time to unwind, to take some space and maybe decide whether or not she actually wanted to go through with the wedding that now seemed less like a future and more like a trap. The cabin had no Wi-Fi, which she'd liked when she booked it, and one bar of cell service. If she stood near the north window and leaned slightly to the left inside, the place was all creaky wood floors and the smell of old varnish. There were knickknacks on the shelves, cow figurines, ceramic roosters, a dusty old globe that no longer spun. In the bathroom, the shower was one of those tall fiberglass stalls with a cloudy glass door, the kind that clicks shut like a refrigerator. And hanging above the toilet, facing the shower, was a landscape painting in a chipped wooden frame. A field of wildflowers under a cloudless blue sky. Very Texas. A little too polished for the rest of the decor, but she didn't question it. It was around midnight when the painting first hit the floor. She'd been reading on the couch when the thud came. Not loud, but sharp enough to make her jump. She walked into the bathroom, expecting maybe the towel rack had come loose, but instead found the painting lying face down on the tile, one corner of the frame cracked. She picked it up and turned it over. No wire hanger, just a rusted nail stuck in the wall and a brittle loop on the back of the frame. Probably just came loose from age. She replaced it, nudged it straight, and went back to her book. It fell again the next day. This time while she was showering. The painting hit the floor with a hollow, echoing thud that reverberated through the stall. She flinched, soap in her eyes, and stepped out carefully to keep from slipping. The frame had broken in 2 spots now, and the canvas was torn along one edge. Annoyed, she set it against the side of the sink and decided to leave it down. It wasn't worth hanging up again. That's when she noticed the hole. It was small, about the size of a silver dollar cut, clean through the drywall. Hidden behind where the painting had hung. She leaned close. The inside of the hole was smooth, dark. She couldn't see far, but when she ran her finger around the edge, it felt slightly curved, like the inside of a tube. She got her phone and shined the flashlight into it. The tunnel behind the hole was long, maybe 4 or 5 inches, and ended in what looked like a metal grate. But something was off. The metal looked newer than the surrounding wall. Too clean. She pressed her eye up to it, squinting past the glare of the light. Beyond the tunnel was a hollow space, an open cavity between the walls. She could just barely make out some framing studs in the back of the drywall. She tilted her head, trying to get a better angle, and that's when she realized where it pointed. Directly into the shower, not angled toward it, not facing it, but aimed squarely at the center of the stall, eye level. She stepped back, the flashlight trembling in her hand. Later, when she texted the host about it, they replied after a long delay. Old ventilation hole. Built that way in the 60s. House is full of weird stuff. Should be sealed though. Just cover it with the painting again. She stared at the message. Something about it didn't sit right. Why would a vent be aimed into the bathroom like that? And if it was a vent, why the need to hide it behind a painting? She didn't cover it. She left the painting propped against the sink and stuffed a hand towel into the hole, jamming it in until it filled the space. That night, she dreamed of eyes watching her from the dark corners of the room. Eyes blinking just beyond the reach of her flashlight. One pair, human, bloodshot. Another, wide and unblinking like a deer's. One small, milky white and half closed. She woke at 3:12 a.m. drenched in sweat. The towel was on the floor. She didn't hear it fall. Didn't even know it had moved until she went to brush her teeth that morning and saw it crumpled under the sink, several feet from where she jammed it. And the hole? The hole was clear again. She didn't call the host. She didn't even text. Instead, she went into town to the Hillsborough Coffee and Antiques and asked the old woman at the register if she knew anything about the property. "You mean the Jennings place?" The woman said, frowning over her glasses. "Yeah, I know it. Pretty little thing. Should have been bulldozed years ago." "Why?" Lavra asked. The woman lowered her voice. "Man who built it, Walter Jennings, he was a teacher back in the 70s. Middle school. Got accused of something bad. Never went to trial, though. They couldn't prove it. He owned that cabin out by the woods. Lived there after he got fired. Became kind of a recluse. People said he was ... watching. Said they'd see him out in the trees sometimes, just standing there. He died in the 90s. Heart attack. Right in that cabin." Lavra felt her stomach twist. "Was he ever arrested?" "No, but folks talked. He had a lot of pictures in that place. Old cameras, lenses, creep stuff. Some say he was watching kids. Others say worse." When Lavra got back, she found the bathroom door closed. She hadn't left it that way. Inside, the painting was back on the wall, hung carefully, neatly, straight. She didn't move. Just stared at it. Her hands felt cold. Her throat was dry. Then, slowly, she walked to the wall, lifted the painting, and looked. No towel. The hole was wide open. She backed away, pulse hammering, went to the bedroom, locked the door. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed with a knife in her hand, watching the door, straining to hear any movement. At 2:46 a.m., she heard breathing, not hers, not her own ragged, terrified breath. A different rhythm, slow and wet, like someone breathing through their mouth. It came from the wall, faint, right beyond the headboard. She pressed her ear against the wood paneling and listened. Inhale, pause, exhale. She left at dawn. Didn't blink, didn't clean. Just got in her car and drove, tires spitting gravel behind. Her heart thudding like a fist against her ribs. 3 days later, she got a message from the host. "Did you take the painting?" She didn't reply, but she checked the reviews online. The listing was gone, replaced by a new one. Same cabin, same porch. Different host name. No mention of the painting. Just one photo of the bathroom. Clean, white walls. No art, but in the corner of the mirror's reflection, Laura saw it, a small hole. Still open, still watching. The rental unit sat on the edge of Port Arthur, near the Sabine Lake shoreline, low to the ground and constantly sweating in the Gulf humidity like something alive. It was one of those older homes turned Airbnb for out-of-towners contractors. Mostly, sometimes tourists heading to the beach. The occasional oil man just looking for somewhere cheap and quiet while he worked weeks on end in the plants. The house looked harmless on the listing, weathered blue siding, big porch with white rocking chairs, and a backyard half eaten by live oaks, but locals mostly avoided it. Not for any specific reason. It was just ... off. Even the air around. It felt heavier than it should. No one paid it much attention until the reports started. A couple from Arkansas staying 2 weeks during shrimp season complained first. They left a note for the owner. "Ice tastes funny. Looks red inside, like blood." The owner, a guy named Clary who lived in Houston and hadn't been to the place in years, chalked it up to old plumbing. He called a handyman who checked the pipes and found nothing. Next guest didn't notice anything, or at least didn't say so. But the third did. She was a traveling nurse, Lisa Brogan, late 30s. Single, quiet. She left the freezer open one night to defrost, thinking it'd help get the smell out. In the morning, there were still ice cubes in the tray. That shouldn't have been possible. The electricity was off at the breaker. She'd flipped it herself to do some work in the bathroom. But the tray, an old plastic thing with deep rectangular slots, was full, and the cubes looked cloudy and pink, like someone had dropped food coloring in the water and half stirred. She dumped them, wiped it out with bleach, but when she came back the next morning, they were there again. She tried to chip them out to toss them. No water line was connected, and she hadn't filled them herself, but her hand slipped and the sharp plastic edge of the tray sliced her finger. The cut was clean, deep. She bled on the tile. But that wasn't what bothered her. It was the cold. The inside of the freezer was too cold, too still. The rest of the house was struggling against. The July heat, windows fogged with condensation, fans barely keeping up, but the freezer felt like a sealed tomb. She stood there for maybe 5 minutes, staring into it. She said later, in the Facebook message she sent to her sister, that she felt like something was looking back at me through the cubes. Not eyes exactly, but pressure. Like if I waited long enough, it'd take my place and close the door. The message was never finished. Her sister didn't see it until a few days later. Lisa had already left the house by then. Her car was found on Highway 73, out of gas, abandoned on the shoulder near a dead patch of swamp. She was inside, strapped in, eyes open, mouth sealed with dried blood. No sign of trauma. Just still, like she'd sat there for days without moving. Autopsy couldn't determine cause of death. Some kind of sudden paralysis, maybe. Maybe a stroke. But the blood on her lips wasn't hers. It was pig blood. That was the beginning of it. Cleary tried to keep things quiet. He disabled reviews for the property, offered refunds, even considered shutting the whole thing down. But then renters started posting on Reddit on strange Airbnb threads. A guy from Oklahoma said he stayed for one night, and when he woke up, he found his dog barking wildly at the fridge. Wouldn't stop. Just stood there, tail between his legs, growling like it smelled something wrong. The ice cubes were red again, but this time he saw them form. He swore under oath later, when someone from the police finally asked that the tray had been dry the night before. In the middle of the night, he got up to get a beer, and the cubes were forming in real time. Water trickled up from the bottom, not down from the spout, up, like something underneath was feeding it. They froze unnaturally fast, too. Solid in seconds. He threw the whole tray out back into the trash, and when he checked in the morning, it was back in the freezer, full again. The guy left before dawn and never came back. Police said he sounded drunk, paranoid, but his hands were shaking, and he had fresh scratches along his arms like he'd been digging at his own skin in his sleep. The place was inspected. HVAC, plumbing, electrical, all standard. The house didn't have any water line to the fridge, none at all. It was an old icebox model from the 80s. The fridge was kept cold by a compressor that barely worked, but somehow ice cubes kept appearing in that same tray, full every day, a faint red hue dancing around the center like blood diluted in salt water. A sample was taken. Local techs sent it to a lab in Beaumont, then to another in Austin when the first results didn't make sense. The second lab confirmed it. Animal blood, specifically pig, diluted, cold, and mixed with trace amounts of chlorine and ammonia enough to confuse the results if you weren't looking hard. The tray was replaced. The freezer was unplugged. Still, every morning the tray was full. Finally, Cleary sent someone to stay for a week. A friend of his named Raymond, a middle-aged guy from Houston who owed Cleary a favor. Raymond went in with a camera, a thermometer, and a notebook. Every hour, he checked the tray. For the first 2 days, nothing happened. The freezer stayed cold, but not unnaturally so. No ice. Then, on the third day, the power cut out. Not to the whole house, just the kitchen. Raymond called Clary, annoyed, said he was heading out to the breaker when he heard something. He described it as wet breathing. Not loud, just faint, muffled, like something exhaling from inside the freezer. He opened it. The tray was full. Red? Again. But this time, there was something underneath, not visible at first. Just a shadow, maybe, a trick of the light. But when he touched the tray to pull it out, he said the ice moved. Not shifted, moved, like it was sloshing against something underneath. Then the bottom cracked. Blood, still warm, leaked out. He filmed it for exactly 20 seconds. The video made it to Cleary, and eventually it leaked out. The internet tore it apart. CGI, prank, viral marketing. But a few experts, forensic analysts, and cold storage specialists said something strange. The way the liquid moved under the tray wasn't consistent with known mechanics. It looked like it was rising, not pooling. Like a tide, Raymond disappeared. The day after filming, his truck was found parked behind a gas station near Orange, Texas, keys in the ignition. No one ever saw him again. Cleary finally pulled the listing, but people kept coming. Paranormal vloggers, podcasters, amateurs with cameras looking to prove something. Some stayed a night, some a week. A few came back shaken. Most didn't say much. One girl live-streamed herself sleeping on the couch for 5 nights straight, with the freezer taped shut. On the 6th night, the tape was gone. She played the footage back, frame by frame. The freezer opened at 3:11 a.m. by itself. Nothing visible. Just a puff of frost, and then the stream cut out. When it came back, she was lying in bed, eyes open, bleeding from her ears. Her lips moved in the footage, one word over and over. Underneath. She was hospitalized, still there, last anyone heard. Doesn't speak, doesn't sleep, just stares. The house is boarded up now. Cleary won't talk. The city won't tear it down, some legal thing, property rights, environmental hazards, but no one touches it. The power's off. The water's off. But sometimes, on hot nights when the air is thick and still, neighbors say they hear the hum of the old fridge running, and if you go close enough, you might see a faint red light glowing through the cracks in the boards. Not fire. Not heat. Just the freezer, still full. It was the kind of place you drove by without thinking twice. A sagging white farmhouse crouched behind a field of scrub and dead mesquite, its front porch stripped bare of furniture, paint flaking off the siding like sunburned skin. The driveway was little more than a scar of ruts and red dirt, weaving off the 2-lane highway that cut through that desolate stretch between Abilene and Fort Stockton. Locals didn't talk about it much, and when they did, it was in a kind of half-joking tone, like they didn't believe what they were saying, or didn't want to. The house had belonged to a man named Carl Bledsoe, a wiry old rancher who drank too much and talked too little. He'd lived alone after his wife died in the early 2000s heart attack in her sleep, they said. No one ever really saw much of him after that. Occasionally he'd show up in town for feed or a carton of cigarettes, looking sunburned and half crazy, mumbling to himself and twitching like a dog in a thunderstorm. When he stopped showing up altogether, the sheriff drove out to check on him and found the front door wide open. Carl gone, and everything in the house coated in dust and dried out silence. Except the radio dock. It was one of those old, heavy tabletop models with dials like knobs off a stovetop and a cracked bakelite casing. It sat in the corner of the kitchen, plugged into the wall despite the power being long shut off. The sheriff swore up and down he saw it turn on by itself, just flicker to life with a loud pop, and start blaring what he called The worst goddamn screaming I've ever heard. Not a scream like someone in pain or even in fear. It was something else, something deeper. Like an entire lifetime of suffering compressed into a single, endless shriek. He yanked the cord out of the wall, but it kept going. Just kept screaming. He pulled it from the counter, ripped out the batteries. It had some emergency pack in the back and it still didn't stop. Finally, he threw it in his cruiser and drove it straight to the dump. Buried the thing under a pile of scrap and broken glass. 3 days later, the house was broken in two. Nothing was taken, but the radio was back. Right there in the same place. Still warm, still humming. People tried to come up with reasons. Maybe Carl had a twin. Maybe he'd never really left. Maybe someone was playing a sick joke. But no one wanted to stay long enough in that house to figure it out. Not when the screaming always started after sundown. I didn't believe any of it. I mean, who would? Ghost radios? Self-replicating technology? That's internet nonsense, YouTube-fueled paranoia. I just graduated with a degree in audio engineering, and I thought it'd be funny hell, maybe even a good thesis project to spend a week in that place, cataloging whatever audio anomalies came up. So I drove out. Found the place on a blistering July afternoon, heat pouring off the land like a fever. I had my gear recorders, analyzers, decibel meters, even a thermal camera. I didn't even knock. No one was there to answer anyway. The inside smelled like heat and rot. Not fresh decay, more like old wood that had sucked in the scent of everything that had ever gone wrong in the house. The floors creaked in a way that didn't sound right, like the wood was trying to say something, and there it was. The radio. It looked even older up close. Covered in dust, warped with sun exposure. There were burn marks around the dial. I checked the back, no batteries. I unplugged it from the wall and tested the socket. No power. I left it on the table and didn't touch it again. I set up my equipment, made notes in my journal, set up the GoPro to monitor it overnight. Nothing happened at first. The screaming didn't start until 11:47 p. It didn't ease in. It hit, full blast, all at once. I jumped out of my skin, knocked over the tripod, hit my shin on the damn kitchen chair. The sound was unbearable, layered, almost mechanical, but still human. A scream that sounded like it was being torn through a meat grinder, looped and reversed, and then looped again. I ripped the power cord out. Nothing. I opened the back. Empty, still screaming. I took it outside and threw it into the brush, where it landed with a heavy thump. But I could still hear it, muffled but insistent. It was like the sound had crawled inside my head and was echoing in my bones. I drove 5 miles back toward town and spent the night in my car. But even there, I kept hearing it faint, like it was riding the wind out. The next morning, I went back. I didn't expect to see it again. I thought maybe I'd imagined it all, sleep deprivation and old stories twisting my mind. But no doubt it was back. Same place, still warm, still screaming. I stayed 2 more nights. I don't know why. Pride, maybe. Stubbornness. I thought if I could isolate the frequency, study the distortion, I could figure it out, make it logical. But it defied everything I knew. The signal didn't come from any known band. It didn't come from anywhere. It wasn't electromagnetic. It wasn't radio frequency. It was like the thing was generating its own impossible current. And then the dreams started. Not even dreams. Really. More like memories that weren't mine. I saw a woman screaming on the floor, eyes wide with terror, clutching her stomach. A child standing over her, mouth moving but no sound coming out. A door slamming shut again and again. A rope hanging from the attic beam. Firelight in the hallway, flickering like someone was burning something just out of sight. Every time I woke up, my mouth tasted like ash and copper. My hands were shaking. On the 4th night, the screaming didn't stop. It usually cut off by Morning, but this time it kept going, louder and louder until the walls themselves seemed to tremble. I tried to leave, but my car wouldn't start. The doors wouldn't open. I smashed the window with a tire iron and crawled out, bloody and desperate, ears ringing. When I looked back at the house, I saw him, Carl, or what was left of him. He was standing in the kitchen window, skin stretched thin, eyes sunken like dark marbles, mouth hanging open in a scream I couldn't hear over the one blaring from the radio. He lifted one hand and pointed not at me, but at the radio. Like he was warning me, or begging me. I ran. I don't remember how far, just that I didn't stop until the house was nothing but a smear on the horizon and the scream had finally died in my ears. I reported it, told the sheriff everything. He didn't even pretend to care, just shook his head and said, "That damn radio's older than God, should have left it alone." I don't go near that highway anymore. I don't even drive through that county if I can help it. But I hear things, stories. A couple kids broke in last summer on a dare. One of them never came out. The other won't speak. Just stares at the wall and hums that same low, awful tone over and over. And someone else told me they saw the radio again. Not in the house, at a flea market in Odessa, just sitting there between a box of VHS tapes and a rusted toaster. No price. No tag. Just humming softly beneath the noise of the crowd, waiting, still warm. They called it the Juniper Pod, a trendy little Airbnb tucked behind a wild hedge of cedar and mesquite just off South Congress Avenue in Austin. It was one of those Instagram-bait properties, solar panels, reclaimed wood, Edison bulbs, and a composting toilet that never quite stopped smelling like warm mulch. The pod had its own garden path made of broken slate, a private hammock, and a red-painted mailbox used not for mail but for welcoming notes and small gifts left by the host. Everything about it screamed curated charm, except for the leather-bound journal. It sat on the built-in shelf beneath the stained glass window beside the bed. Its cover worn soft with the oils of many hands, its edges curled and weathered. Inside were the usual sort of messages you'd find in any guest book thank yous. Inside jokes, scribbled drawings of sunsets, dates scrawled alongside hearts. But if you kept flipping through, past the watercolor doodles and gratitude, past the half-hearted poetry and Polaroids taped in with washi tape, you'd get to the weird ones. The ones nobody brought up in their online reviews. The first was dated sometime in April, written in neat handwriting, all capital letters. If you're reading this and you're here alone, you won't be by morning. Below that, someone else had written shakily, "My door opened by itself at 3 a.m. I thought it was the wind." But someone breathed on my neck. Another guest had circled both entries in red pen and written in looping cursive, "Y'all are sick, not funny." But the entries didn't stop. May 12th. The mirror fogged up last night and someone wrote "Hi" in it, but I was alone and I never showered. May 14th. Heard scratching from under the floorboards. Went to knock back and the knocking continued. That's when I packed and left. May 30th. Thought it was a prank like a scavenger hunt or escape room, but something moved in the crawl space. I saw its hand. The host, a 30-something woman named Caitlin with a portfolio of similar hipster rentals and a cheerful automated response for everything, brushed off any concern. Oh, the journal? That's part of the fun. The Austin experience. Haha, guests like to spook each other. Creative types. She never stayed in the pod herself. I booked it in July, not for fun, and not because I was trying to have a weird Austin weekend. I was going through a divorce, had just been laid off from a decent copywriting job, and couldn't stand the inside of my beige one-bedroom in Pflugerville anymore. Something about the city felt suffocating that summer. The heat was unbearable. The sky constantly overcast with smoke from distant brush fires, and the night stretched on like something was wrong with the clock. I wasn't sleeping well, so I booked the Juniper pod for a full week, figuring the change of scenery might jolt something loose. The first night was quiet. Cicadas buzzed outside like they were trying to shake the leaves off the trees. The inside of the pod was dim and cozy, with little lanterns and thick curtains. There was a single bed with a patchwork quilt and a low table with a carafe of water and a glass. I found the journal almost immediately and read it with a smirk, thinking it was a pretty clever guestbook gimmick. Probably some performance art collective trying to go viral. I flipped through the stranger entries and even added one of my own. No ghost yet. Just me and the tequila. I slept fine. Second night, I woke up at 2:58 a.m. according to my phone. The air felt thin, not cold, but heavy in my chest. I was facing the wall, my back to the rest of the pod, and I got the sense, completely irrational, that someone was standing directly behind me, not touching, just there, watching. I held still, heart thudding like a kid scared of monsters, and finally turned over fast. Like pulling off a band-aid. No one there. The door was closed, the window latched. No sounds except the hum of a distant highway and the chirr of insects. The next morning, I went for coffee at Joe's down the road, sat under the misting fans, and tried to laugh it off. Told myself it was the tequila. That may be the stories. In the journal had planted a seed. Power of suggestion. Classic urban legend stuff. But when I came back later that afternoon, the journal had moved. I'd left it on the shelf. Now it was on the bed, open to a fresh page. No signature. No date. Just one line, written in smudged pencil. Don't turn around when it taps. I froze. My hands actually trembled when I closed the book. I checked the door lock, still secure. No sign of forced entry, nothing stolen or out of place. But now, my stomach had dropped into a hollow pit and my heart wouldn't stop racing. I thought about calling Caitlin, the host, but what would I say? Hi, your haunted guest book left me a message? Instead, I spent that night with every light on, half-empty bottle of mezcal on the nightstand, and a kitchen knife under my pillow like I was in some backwoods slasher movie. At exactly 3:01 a.m., there was a tap on the window. Not a knock. A single, deliberate tap. I held my breath. Waited. Another tap. Same place. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. Instead, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Nope, nope, not real. Not real," over and over until I either passed out or fell asleep from pure panic. When I woke up, there was a mark on the outside of the window. A single fingerprint, smudged, long, too long. I packed my things, but before I left, I went back to the journal and wrote, "Don't stay here more than 3 nights." It's not the pod, it's the book. It remembers, it writes back. As I closed it, I noticed something faint in the back cover. Someone had carved initials, Halar 1976. Later, after checking into a chain hotel up north with paper-thin walls and a TV that blared static at 2 a.m. no matter what I did, I started digging. Not through Yelp or Airbnb, but city archives. Forums, local legends. The property where the Juniper pod stood used to belong to a man named Leonard Russell L.R. He was a school teacher, bachelor, owned a modest home built in the late 50s. No kids, no wife. The city demolished his house in the early 2000s, sold the land for redevelopment. But in 1976, neighbors had reported Leonard missing. The last anyone saw of him, he'd been ranting at the mailman about people stealing his thoughts. They found a journal in his home full of strange, disjointed entries. It's writing again. Not me. My hand moves, but I don't. She wants me to write her name. If I do, I think she'll live here forever. The guest who reads this will bring her back. I'm not saying it's the same journal. I'm not saying anything definite, really. All I know is that the Juniper pod isn't listed anymore. Caitlin deactivated her host account sometime in August. I sent her a message through another listing she managed, but never heard back. And last week, someone posted on Reddit's Our Paranormal about finding a leather-bound guest log in a Goodwill off Burnett Road. Same handwriting. Same strange entries. Last page reads, "If you're reading this and you're here alone, you won't be by morning." And the final comment below that, "I tried burning it. It didn't burn." It was already hot in San Angelo by mid-May. One of those years where the heat came early and thick, like syrup on everything you touched. The kind of weather where metal buckles scorched skin and the air smelled like asphalt and dying grass. The house on Bandera Circle had sat empty for about 3 months before the listing went up. A nice enough place by West Texas standards, 3 bedrooms, stonework facade, fake wood vinyl floors that passed for the real thing if you didn't look too hard. The backyard backed up to one of those dried-out drainage ditches filled with mesquite and junked bicycles, and the roof had been patched in uneven shingles after the last hailstorm. But still nothing you'd call a teardown. It should have sold quick, except at DIDN single quotes T. The agent, a woman named Donna Haskell who'd been flipping ranch-style homes in the area for over a decade, was the first to bring up the smell. She walked in for the showing and immediately gagged. She told her assistant it was like someone had left raw hamburger meat in the sun for a week, except deeper than that. Wet, almost chemical. They opened all the windows, turned on ceiling fans, sprayed enough Febreze to drown in, and still it lingered. Mostly in the master bedroom. Right above the bed, near the central air vent, they tried everything. Air purifiers, ozone treatments, bleach and vinegar, and a company that specialized in disaster cleanup. A local priest was even brought in for a blessing after someone half-joked that the place felt sick. Nothing worked. The house was pulled from listings after 2 prospective buyers walked out gagging within 10 minutes. One vomited in the driveway and said she felt like something had crawled into her skin. That's when the cleaning crew was called in. A private company out of Midland known for discretion biohazard stuff, hoarder houses, sometimes crime. Scene cleanup. They sent 3 men in white suits and respirators, and after pulling out the metal grate from the bedroom vent, one of them stopped cold. Inside the duct, wrapped in layers of dusty insulation and pressed hard against the corner, was the mummified corpse of what looked like a small dog. Its skin had dried into tight, leathery folds, and its lips were curled back in a permanent, grotesque snarl. But it wasn't the dog that made the man fall backward. It was the ring. A silver wedding band, still shiny, tied tight around its neck with a length of what looked like old shoelace. Burned into the metal on the inside was a name, Deborah-6.12.92. That should have been the end of it. Creepy, yes. A pet that crawled into a vent and died. But the ring didn't belong to any known previous owner. Donna ran the property records back 30 years. No Deborahs. No reports of missing pets or wives or anything else. The house had only changed hands twice, once in 1993 and then again in 2006. The original owners, a couple named Carl and Denise Gearing, had moved to Austin after their youngest left for college. Still alive, still married. They said they'd never owned a dog. After that, the house stayed empty again. The smell never left. Even after the ductwork was cleaned and replaced, even after every carpet was ripped out and every piece of drywall scrubbed or repainted. The stink was less pungent, but it still came back, especially at night when the air turned humid. Meat. Rot. Oily and sweet. The story could have died there. passed around among local realtors and pest control workers as a funny one-liner about cursed houses and buyer's remorse. But then things started happening to the crew that pulled the dog out. The first, Manuel Jimenez, crashed his pickup into a guardrail outside Big Spring. No drugs or alcohol, but the patrol report mentioned something strange. He'd been swerving, according to witnesses, like he was trying to shake something off him. His face at the scene was frozen mid-scream, like he'd seen something just before impact. The second, Jesse Loden, was found in his garage 2 weeks later, carbon monoxide. His wife said he hadn't been sleeping. Said he kept waking up at 3:33 a.m. every morning and pacing the house, muttering about scratching noises in the ducts, about something breathing behind the walls. He started sleeping in the guest room with the AC turned off. She thought he was going through something, maybe early dementia, maybe drugs. But there were claw marks on the inside of the guest room air vent. 3 long scrapes, shallow but deliberate, only. The third guy, Kyle Brock, made it out okay, at least on paper. He left Texas entirely, moved to Idaho to live with his brother, and refused to take any calls from the company or the press afterward. A neighbor said she saw him standing in the snow in his backyard once, bare feet turning purple, just staring up at the sky and whispering something. She said he didn't seem right. Nobody in town likes talking about 23 Bandera Circle now. A lot of places in Texas have stories like that: bad land, haunted wells, oil money turned sour. But this one's different. The smell's still there. People have broken in since, urban explorers mostly. One TikTok kid said he spent a night there and woke up with a nosebleed and a bruised ankle, even though he hadn't fallen or moved from the bed. He posted a video before deleting it, grainy footage of him panning around the dark room while the central AC kicks on. Just before the camera glitches, you can hear it. A faint groaning sound from the vent. Too deep to be the ductwork. There's a theory going around now. One of those online rabbit holes that gets reposted on Reddit and in horror podcasts. The theory says the house was never built properly. That the land it sits on, near the Conco River, was part of an old dumping ground. Back in the 1940s. Not an official one. Just a place where people buried things they shouldn't have. Animals, bodies, whatever. Another theory says the house was built on top of something older. Not a burial site, not a cemetery, but something meaner. One of those old places where people went missing and the ground never quite gave them back. Some old-timers say there used to be a dry well there, the kind that howled at night. But those are just stories. Still, you have to wonder, why the wedding ring? Why tie it around a dog's neck and push it into a vent? I found something, though. I was researching the property for a piece. I was writing on haunted real estate, one of those spooky clickbait articles, and I pulled up a microfiche newspaper from June 1993. A small, 2-paragraph blurb in the back of the San Angelo Standard-Times. Local. Woman Deborah Childs, 31, reported missing by husband Richard Childs. Last seen walking her miniature poodle, Sammy, near the Bandera Circle development. No signs of foul play. Police investigating. That name again. Deborah. No follow-up stories. No arrests. No closure. Richard Childs sold the lot later that year, before the house was even finished. Moved to Kansas. Died in 2004. No other records of him ever owning a dog. I found a photo. Old scan of a missing person flyer. Deborah has curly hair and bright eyes. She's wearing a t-shirt with a paw print on it, holding a little white dog. I don't know what happened in that house. I don't know how a dog's mummified corpse ended up tied with a ring to its neck inside a vent in a house that wasn't even built yet when she disappeared. But I know the smell won't leave. I know every time someone opens that front door, it comes rushing back, sickly sweet and wet, Meat dash gone dash bad dot, and sometimes, when the AC kicks on, the house groans, and the ductwork rattles, and something breathes.